Red flame in the cold night glow, Wisconsin wind and the stars all know. She's got fire where her heart should be, liberty's call, she answers free. Stepping hills, but she's still inside, no fear, no doubt, she won't hide. Capital lights on a battle cry, a mama lying, watch her rise. Words are weapons, truth a blade, in the chaos she's unafraid. Standing tall, she breaks the chain, crimson faith runs through her veins. Oh, they whisper, you can't change it. She smiles, watch me rearrange it. Every vote, every voice ignite, for the mothers who won't lose sight. Lover is Scarlett rising through the storm and smoke, voice of reason, every chain she broke. Liberty beats in her chest so loud, a freedom queen, a mother style. Crimson lights, Republican gold, this is the story the future told. Scarlett's flame, unbreakable, free. She's the power, the legacy. Moms united, hearts aligned, defending truth, they will not blind. Children's voices light the sky, they're the reason, they're the why. Born to blaze in the northern snow, Wisconsin roots, watch her grow. Constitution's ink on her soul, patriot mind control. No, she don't bend, she don't fade. Faith and family foundations laid, from freedom halls to every school. She's the queen who rewrites rule. Every Scarlett rising through the storm and smoke, a voice of reason, every chain she broke. Liberty beats in her chest so wild, a freedom queen, a mother style. Crimson lights, Republican gold, this is the story the future told. Scarlett's flame, unbreakable, free. Mom for liberty, eternally. Mom for liberty, eternally. Red flame shining bright, Scarlett's name, liberty's light, forever fight. Every Scarlett forever fight. Red flame in the cold night glow, Wisconsin wind and the stars all know. She's got fire where her heart should be, liberty's call, she answers free. Stepping hills, but she's still inside, no fear, no doubt, she won't hide. Capital lights on a battle cry, a mama lying, watch her rise. Words are weapons, truth a blade, in the chaos she's unafraid. Standing tall, she breaks the chain, crimson faith runs through her veins. Oh, they whisper, you can't change it. She smiles, watch me rearrange it. Every vote, every voice ignite, for the mothers who won't lose sight. Lover is Scarlett rising through the storm and smoke, voice of reason, every chain she broke. Liberty beats in her chest so loud, a freedom queen, a mother style. Crimson lights, Republican gold, this is the story the future told. Scarlett's flame, unbreakable, free. She's the power, the legacy. Moms united, hearts aligned, defending truth, they will not blind. Children's voices light the sky, they're the reason, they're the why. Born to blaze in the northern snow, Wisconsin roots, watch her grow. Constitution's ink on her soul, patriot mind control. No, she don't bend, she don't fade. Faith and family foundations laid, from freedom halls to every school. queen who rewrites rules. Every scarlet rising through the storm and smoke, the voice of reason, every chain she broke. Liberty beats in her chest so wild. A freedom queen, a mother style. Crimson lights, Republican gold. This is the story the future told. Scarlet flame, unbreakable, free. Mom for liberty, eternally. Mom for liberty, eternally. Yeah. Red flame shining bright. Scarlet's name, liberty's light, forever fight. Every scarlet rise, forever fight. Red flame in the cold night glow, Wisconsin wind and the stars all know. She's got fire where her heart should be. Liberty's call, she answers free. Stepping hills, but she's still inside. No fear, no doubt, she won't hide. Capital lights on a battle cry. A mama lying, watch her rise. Words are weapons, truth a blade. In the chaos, she's unafraid. Standing tall, she breaks the chain. Crimson faith runs through her veins. Oh, they whisper, you can't change it. She smiles, watch me rearrange it. Every vote, every voice ignite. For the mothers who won't lose sight. Lover scarlet rising through the storm and smoke. Voice of reason, every chain she broke. Liberty beats in her chest so wild. A freedom queen, a mother style. Crimson lights, Republican gold. This is the story the future told. Scarlet's flame, unbreakable, free. She's the power, the legacy. Moms united, hearts aligned. Defending truth, they will not blind. Children's voices light the sky. They're the reason, they're the why. Born to blaze in the northern snow. Wisconsin roots, watch her grow. Constitution's ink on her soul. Patriot mind control. No, she don't bend, she don't fade. Faith and family foundations laid. From freedom halls to every school, she's the queen who rewrites rules. Every scarlet rising through the storm and smoke. The voice of reason, every chain she broke. Liberty beats in her chest so wild. A freedom queen, a mother style. Crimson lights, Republican gold. This is the story the future told. Scarlet flame, unbreakable, free. Mom for liberty, eternally. Mom for liberty, eternally. Yeah. Red flame shining bright. Scarlet's name, liberty's light, forever fight. Every scarlet forever fight.
We also need to activate, in Wisconsin, 60,000 classroom teachers who do hard work every single day, and make sure that they are committed, have that commitment to. I know they do, but how will they have the voice to do that, I think is a real question mark in my mind. And we're working hard around that issue of teacher voice and teacher leadership, and we're hoping to, use your term again, bake that in, and bake the equity piece in. So we need to work on it from the kind of public policy vantage point with advocacy groups, but we also make sure that I bring along 60,000 Wisconsin teachers to that.
So all school districts must submit a signed certification that they are in compliance with federal anti-discrimination laws by April 24th. In Wisconsin, State Superintendent Jill Underley says they will not comply. They will not sign anything that says that they are in compliance with Title IX, meaning male, female, gender identity not included. Title IX is going to protect women. It's a sex-based anti-discrimination. And she says no, because
affirming identities is suicide prevention. It's proven self-care. It's strong mental health practice. Pronouns save lives. So let me say this.
Yeah, the woman who says pronouns save lives, of course, she's not going to sign the certification, meaning millions and millions of dollars are at risk for Wisconsin schools. She says she's not being political. What do you think?
Early phase of my transition, I giggle a bit at how it felt to try out new names. I had the luxury of being able to order my coffee with a bunch of different names to try on for size.
These anti-trans bills are part of an organized nationwide hate movement designed to keep me and my people in the closet and increase our suicide rates.
Interfere and attempt to dictate what children can call themselves and which sports teams they can play on.
Still, I use they, them pronouns.
Is there an age like that where it would be inappropriate to let the child change their identity, their sex identity?
I don't think that there's an age. My strong belief is that all young people have a right to self-determination. We should trust them in what they believe is right for themselves.
People had talked today about trans people mutilating their bodies. I was cutting myself long before I ever tried to transition. I do understand. I am a parent. My daughter is 9 years old. I don't need her to tell me as soon as something happens. That is not my job as a parent.
I am a non-binary person. I use they, them pronouns. You might consider me a successful trans adult. I am helping raise a trans child.
Creating humans in God's image, and there is no gender. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them.
Someone who raised your hand and said that you got radicalized in college. Imagine if you got radicalized 4 years earlier. Okay? There's a dialectic between these organizations, but there are some major differences. High schools are a cross-section of our community. So when we look around higher ed and we're like, why is everyone so white and rich here? Look at the public schools. We need to train high schoolers how to organize. High school teachers, our hands are really tied. Work with the high schools, connect with the teachers unions, connect with your kids' teachers. Give them, I'm going to be honest, give us money. Like on Teacher Appreciation Day, send a gift card to your high school teachers. Elementary school teachers get it, high school don't. Or like, whatever. Just offer material support whenever you can. Show up at their protests, like send an email and say that you support them. Because school boards listen to families. Follow your school board of the local public schools. Follow them on social media. Go to those meetings if you can, but like small policy changes will transform your city.
Children's communities, their classrooms are also some of the most inclusive and equitable places in our state. This is thanks again to their diversity and the fact that public schools are for everyone. And it is also despite the push from some leaders to try and homogenize learning in a way that is just not reflective of historical or current reality, nor of a child's lived experience. It is also thanks to intentional community building and social emotional learning in our classrooms that creates a deep understanding of educational equity among our students.
Lost the plot. We as Democrats nationally from Latinx to defunding the police to police organizations are all racist to bringing a set of cultural wars to our schools. We are on the losing side of those cultural wars. Full stop. You are worried about bathroom access and locker room access. Why don't you focus on classroom excellence? You have 50% of our kids not reading at grade level.
Well, they can just say we can do both.
You've proven you can't, because you've permitted a 30-year low in reading and math scores, and nobody seems to be calling the whistle on this. We've lost the plot.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unleashed with me, Scarlett Johnson, presented by Moms for Liberty. In June of 2024, 88 people checked into a water park resort in the Wisconsin Dells. They were not there for the lazy river. They were there for another reason. They were there to decide what children in Wisconsin had to know before the state of Wisconsin was willing to call that child proficient. That means reading, doing math at grade level, proficient. 4 days, nearly $369,000 were spent of taxpayer dollars. And at the door, every one of those 88 people, they had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. No notes, no recording, no laptops, no social media. Nothing was to leave the room. And when they came out, well, what happened next is shocking. There was a decision made that rather than examine why NAEP scores had been falling, why the crater in proficiency rates in Wisconsin children, how was public education failing students, and what could be done to save Milwaukee Public Schools and other public schools in the state that were somewhere nearing 0% proficiency? That means 0% of kids in a school were reading at grade level, were able to do math at grade level. That's just shocking and unacceptable. So the head of Wisconsin Public Schools is Jill Underly. In Wisconsin, it's called the Wisconsin Department of Instruction. So she is the state superintendent of schools and head of Wisconsin DPI. In plain English, what Jill did and those 88 people, what they took part in, was nothing more than a conspiracy to make sure that parents didn't know the truth about what was happening in schools. It was a way to cover up these low scores, because a lot of parents, a lot of community members, they were getting upset. Didn't matter if they were Republican or Democrat. They could see, they knew. The business owners, small business owners, large business owners in Wisconsin, it was becoming obvious to them. Wisconsin public schools were graduating kids that were unprepared for the real world. They're unprepared for the rigors of college. Heck, They're unprepared to work at McDonald's. These are kids that can barely read and do basic math. Instead, public schools weren't teaching kids to thrive. Heck, they weren't even really teaching kids to survive. They just became diploma factories. Here you go. Kind of like Oprah. You get a diploma, you get a diploma, you get a diploma. Even if you can't read, you get a diploma. In fact, you might even be in honors classes with straight A's. What's happening to education in Wisconsin? What's happening to education in America? How is what's happening in Wisconsin relevant to you out there if you don't live in Wisconsin? Well, my guest, Steve Cortes, is coming on, and he's going to explain all of this. Only 3 in 10 children in Wisconsin can read at a grade proficient level. That's shocking. And Wisconsin isn't alone. Similar statistics, they're in every state, in some area of every state around the country. But Wisconsin, unfortunately, well, we're number one. We're number one at failing kids. It's not an honor of distinction. You see, Wisconsin has the widest gap between Black and white students of any state in America. And it's not because of funding. Funding has increased. Funding in DEI has overwhelmed the system. Wisconsin continues to spend more and more on public education every year. Yet the results, well, kids are doing worse and worse in schools. What's happening? Wisconsin owns this horrible title. We have the widest gap between Black and white students in America. We've owned this title for years. And for years, Democrat after Democrat, they've been in charge. Teachers unions, they're in charge. SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center curriculum, unions want it, unions get it. Go to the DPI website of Wisconsin. One woke program after another. A lot of LGBTQIA+, but not enough of the ABCs. When Wisconsin DPI is more concerned about providing gender-expansive curriculum to 3-year-olds, it's a fact, than they are in teaching 3-year-olds phonics, then you have a problem. Woke education, it's failing Wisconsin students, it's failing students all over the country. Now in November, the state of Wisconsin, it's a battle state again. Boy, that's why Steve Cortes came here, because Wisconsin is one of those rare states that's truly purple. It's a bellwether state. It's sort of the canary in the coal mine. As goes Wisconsin, so goes the country. And in November, citizens of this state get to decide things. They get to decide if they are willing to stick with the status quo in education, or if they're ready for change. If they're ready for someone as governor that's not going to do more of the same. Someone who isn't owned by teachers' unions and corrupt educrats. Someone who actually cares about teachers, not teachers' unions. Someone who cares about providing reading specialists, not DEI specialists. We need somebody that's going to be an agent of change. Is Wisconsin ready for that? Well, Steve Cortes thinks, yeah, and I agree. Steve came to Wisconsin to figure out how we got where we are. He brought a camera into the heartland. He followed the money and he did not blink. Let's watch this documentary that Steve Cortes has made. It's a short one, but it's very, very good. And afterwards, let's talk with Steve and do a deep dive into why schools are failing in Wisconsin.
American children increasingly can't read.
Students' average reading test scores sunk back to 1998 levels.
They also cannot do basic math.
Math scores dropped to historic lows.
Now, that's not an opinion, mind you. That's the brutal truth, as revealed by the cold numbers, the facts. Now, before we get into some of the obvious fallout from such a tragic trend, let's consider a worldview macro assessment. Other than preserving public order, the next most important priority of any society is the care and cultivation of its young. And educating children connects directly back to public order because failing to prepare children to be responsible and productive citizens inevitably leads to new adults who become criminals and destroyers rather than leaders and builders. So why are we failing in such dramatic fashion in this foundational task? Why do our educational outcomes crash even as our spending on schooling soars ever higher? Why are the Democrats regarded as the party of education when academic success practically disappears from the areas that they, the Democrats, control? On that topic, one very sensible sounding answer comes from a very unlikely source, Rahm Emanuel, the former mayor of deeply blue Chicago, the progressive political operator who worked as Obama's chief of staff and all-around political hammer. Here's what he had to say.
We lost the plot. We as Democrats nationally, from Latinx to defunding the police to police organizations are all racist to bringing a set of cultural wars to our schools. We are on the losing side of those cultural wars. Full stop. You are worried about bathroom access and locker room access. Why don't you focus on classroom excellence? You have 50% of our kids not reading at grade level.
Well, they can just say we can do both.
You've proven you can't, because you've permitted a 30-year low in reading and math scores, and nobody seems to be calling the whistle on this. We've lost the plot.
He's right, of course. They have lost the plot, but why? And what do we now do about it? For answers, we travel to the American heartland, to Wisconsin. That state is the geographic and metaphorical core of America. It was once home to a proud tradition of really successful public education, a model. Now, despite spending mountains of taxpayer money on schools, the results in Wisconsin, they crater. We'll find out why and how to fix it before it's too late. Now, regarding national test scores, see these charts from the New York Times. That goes back a decade. Now, for many years, test scores went sideways to slightly up, very consistently. Then, starting before the COVID panic, they started to tick down. Then, they simply fell off a cliff, and the scores are not even close to recovering the lost ground, especially in reading. So that is nationally. How about Wisconsin? Well, have a look at Milwaukee's scores. Same story as the larger US trend. You don't have to be math proficient to know that this chart is headed exactly the wrong way. To put that graph in grade level terms, the typical student is reading a full 3.6 years behind, meaning an 8th grader in Wisconsin's largest city is likely reading at a 4th grade level, even as he or she prepares to enter high school. But just in case you're tempted to dismiss this plunge in test scores as just some inner city problem or confined to large urban metros, well, think again. Take a look at largely white, non-urban Eau Claire scores. Thankfully, these Northwest Wisconsin kids, they started from a place of relative success. But that prior advantage, it isn't going to last because the trend is not their friend. Before long, unless real action is taken to reverse this sad slide, the children of suburban and rural Wisconsin will be just as woefully unprepared for life as the kids of Milwaukee. Speaking of standards, the Wisconsin Department of Instruction, effectively the State Board of Ed, guess how it's responding to this crisis in educational achievement? It's lowering standards. Yep, you guessed it. Don't like the results? Well, change the standards, and we can all just pretend that we're doing well. Move the goalposts. If the consequences weren't so dire, it would almost be comical. That's not how the real world works, of course. Not in the workplace, not in sports, not in competition with other states or other countries. But many of these entitled, pompous bureaucrats, they don't operate in the real world. Instead, they seem to see education as some land of pretend, where money grows on trees and results don't really matter. Perhaps that's why DPI made its grand plans to lower standards, and I'm not making this up, at a lavish taxpayer-funded junket to the Wisconsin Dells and the Chula Vista Resort water park that cost the taxpayers of Wisconsin almost $400,000. Here's some local reporting on that boondoggle.
State education leaders are reported to have spent hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars at a conference. Today, Republican lawmakers are demanding answers from the agency. Our Wisconsin State Capitol Bureau Chief Vanessa Kelson has reaction.
The Dairyland Sentinel reports the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction spent nearly $400,000 on a 4-day conference at a water park resort in the Wisconsin Dells for their 2024 test standards meeting.
So, while regular citizens struggle to pay their bills, including skyrocketing property taxes that primarily fund schools, these so-called experts, they enjoyed a vacation that you paid for, so that they could change the definitions and increase proficiency of students. Oh, and making it all much worse, they did this in secret. That's right. In a state, Wisconsin, with strong government transparency laws, they required participants in this water park education junket to sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, meaning they are muzzled and cannot even discuss the proceedings. Jake Curtis is an Air Force veteran, attorney, and chief legal officer of the Institute for Reforming Government. So, Jake Curtis, thank you so much for doing this. Please tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So thanks for having me on, Steve. I'm Jake Curtis, General Counsel for the Institute for Reforming Government. We focus on kitchen table issues. It's the issues people really care about: taxes, education, oversight. We're a center-right organization, but we really strive to focus on the issues that Wisconsinites care about that impact them every day.
Wisconsin long prided itself on being a state that was very open about public life, a lot of transparency in government in Wisconsin. It seems like in education, that's not the case anymore. Can you tell us about that?
I think that's a great way to put it. From a transparency standpoint, Wisconsin has always prided itself on its sunshine laws. So whether that's public records or open meetings and bipartisan approach to those issues. Unfortunately, I think the current administration has pulled back on that, and it's problematic. And that's what we're seeing right now with the situation that IRG has really exposed when it comes to DPI. Basically, they had a process where looking at kind of the core subjects, reading, science, math, they looked at those kind of standards of where students are performing in the state. And so for years, it was at one level. And unfortunately, the current DPI superintendent had a process where the standards were lowered. And so the problem is, if you're a parent in Wisconsin, you might have had your kid at a certain level in 1 year, and the next year, all of a sudden, your kid is doing exceptionally better. Now, maybe they are, right? Maybe they are doing better, and that'd be great. The problem is when you have a standardized test, right, you need an apples-to-apples comparison to make sure your kid is still achieving at the level that he or she should be. Right. And you now have a situation where a lot of parents and school districts and leaders in education aren't really sure if the kids are achieving at the level they should be.
Right. Is it a fair comparison to say that they moved the goalposts?
They absolutely moved the goalposts. And the problem is, from a transparency standpoint, it appears did it intentionally so that the public wasn't aware. Okay. That is really, I think, the biggest problem here, Steve.
So, Jake, they didn't just move the goalposts, but it seems as though they did it under the cloak of darkness.
I think that's right. And one of the things we uncovered at IRG was a meeting that took place. 88 individuals from across the state were essentially invited to the Wisconsin Dells to sit down and go through test questions, review kind of where that would align with previous questions and how that would impact the test scores. Again, all valid things to have done. If the DPI wanted to take this information into account to have done that, fine. The problem is she didn't give any notice to the public. Mm-hmm. The invitees were essentially required to sign non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. No communicating on social media, no notes, no computer logs, no recording or anything, right?
Yeah.
So this was very much done in secret. If we knew that meeting was happening, and this isn't just like some talking point,
sure,
we would have been there.
Sure.
Multiple individuals from our
As
organization,
citizens,
others,
as advocates, as experts, you would have been there.
Absolutely.
Can you fill us in on your litigation?
So in Wisconsin, anybody who thinks there basically has been a open meetings violation can go to their local district attorney or the attorney general. And so when we discovered what was happening with DPI and started to ask questions, we actually ultimately decided that we were going to file a complaint with the local district attorney. She has 20 days to respond and make a decision. If she decides not to do anything, or we're not satisfied with the response, we can actually proceed and file an actual complaint in circuit court. And we're prepared to do that. We're still waiting on her response, but we think it's that important. If a court determines that an open meetings violation took place, statutorily, the court can actually unwind that action. And so this is a real remedy, and this is how important we think it is.
Yeah. To that point, Wisconsin used to pride itself on being one of the best public education states in America, but test scores have plunged, so people are concerned, naturally.
Absolutely. These achievement gaps are real. I mean, in some of these cases, it's 70, 80% of kids that can't read or can't do basic math.
If you're not proficient in reading and in mathematics, you're going to have a really difficult life.
Oh, absolutely. And Wisconsin's a perfect example. What do? We build things and we grow things in the state. Even the ag industry is getting driven by technology.
Sure.
It's AI-driven analysis, data-driven analysis for cattle.
Right.
And so to your point, if you don't have basic reading and math, I think you're going to struggle. And that's what we need to prevent from happening.
Right. Now, Jake, you're fighting in the courts, which I commend you, but there's also an election, right? So do you believe that education is going to be an important political issue in the gubernatorial election?
I'm not making this up. I literally came from a business roundtable this morning, and that was hour-and-a-half discussion. Probably 50% of the conversation was about education.
And these aren't educators. These are business folks.
If I were to span the room, I'm not sure there was a single educator in the room. These were business leaders. A lot of it came back to K-12, higher education, right? How are we equipping kids for the future?
Sure. Listen, Jay Curtis, you're fighting for citizens, you're fighting for children, fighting for your state, so I commend you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for doing this. I can just picture the registration table at the water park. Welcome to the conference. You can't start drinking Miller Lite or eating free brats until you sign the NDA. Right here, Dr. So-and-so from the University of wherever. Even as test scores plunge, and even as student enrollment tanks, the spending spree marches on, including massive new hiring of staff. For example, from 2020 to now, Wisconsin lost nearly 50,000 students, but added over 2,000 public school staffers. How does that math make any sense? Wisconsin also now claims the ignoble title of the widest achievement gap in America between black and white students. Here is Wisconsin PBS reporting.
This week, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, also known as the Nation's Report Card, released results finding Wisconsin has the widest achievement gap in the country. Scores show the gap between black and white students increasing in both math and reading.
A bunch of over-credentialed so-called experts literally moving the educational goalposts and then pretending that lower expectations produce success. The numbers don't lie, even though politicians do. Politicians like Governor Evers, who has effectively run education in Wisconsin for a full 16 years. 16 years. First, 2 terms as superintendent of education, running the DPI, and then, of course, 2 terms as governor. So what has happened during those 16 years of Democrats running education in Wisconsin? Well, a state that formerly boasted about great public schools now faces a brutal reality. What kind of future will these children have if they cannot proficiently even read? What kind of future will Wisconsin have if the young minds of the state are not prepared and formed to be productive, to be terrific parents, productive workers, and upstanding citizens? This present situation, it's not okay. Not anywhere. And it's pervasive all across America, and very few politicians even seem to care about it. But one person who does is Congressman Tom Tiffany. He's running for governor, and he flat out refuses to accept a managed slow decline into academic sloth and low standards.
U.S. Congressman Tom Tiffany grew up on a Wisconsin dairy farm, became a business owner and boat captain, and is the presumptive Republican nominee for governor of the Badger State.
Congressman Tom Tiffany, thank you so much for doing this. Now, you're running for governor of Wisconsin. You're a proud Wisconsinite. Wisconsin for a long time was known as a really solid education state. Is that true today?
Wisconsin is slipping, and it's really unfortunate. It was always in the top 5 for like ACT scores, and now we have slipped out of the top 10, and we've fallen so far that we're now behind Mississippi. So we have about 7 and 10 fourth graders that cannot read at grade level. It's no longer just a Milwaukee problem. It's become a statewide problem, and education has really been in free fall. We need to fix it, because all the other stuff that we want to do to make Wisconsin one of those great states again, you can't do it if you don't have a strong educational system.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the test scores going down. The number of students is also declining pretty significantly, and yet spending has soared. Is that a good deal for the taxpayers of Wisconsin?
You know, taxpayers of Wisconsin have always been willing to fund education. We believe in that. It goes back to the origins of our state. But now we're up to $18,000 per student in the state as a whole, $23,000 in Milwaukee, and the results are not there. And it's a lot of that's driven, I believe, by the Department of Public Instruction that has become more focused on social engineering rather than educating children.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that the DPI, the Department of Public Instruction, do you believe it's corrupt?
I know they're not doing their job. They take a junket up to the Wisconsin Dells. You have over 200 sexual misconduct cases that have been swept under the rug by the Department of Public Instruction. But then, of course, I mean, you see the educational freefall that's happening in our state. They're clearly not doing their job.
Now, regarding these declining education outcomes, why is the Dems' fault?
They've allowed it to happen. So look at our current governor, Tony Evers. He ran in 2018 when he defeated Governor Walker. He said, I'm the education governor. Look at where we're at today. We're in a far worse position than when he first came in as governor. But he was also the secretary of the Department of Public Instruction 8 years prior to that. He has completely failed us. And the person that's running the Department of Public Instruction at this point is a progressive leftist. It's been their responsibility. They have ownership of it, and they're not doing anything to turn it around.
Okay, and if you're elected governor, if you earn the support of the people of Wisconsin, what will you do then? What will be the reforms of Governor Tiffany on education?
First of all, we're going to set higher standards, not lower standards. We are going to have honest report cards. Parents are going to be able to know how their school is doing. We're going to pay good teachers more money. If you're a proven teacher and you're doing an outstanding job, and I think about outstanding teachers that me and my 7 brothers and sisters had growing up on the farm in western Wisconsin, those teachers should be paid more money if they're doing a really good job. But instead, we're hiring all this administrative personnel that really is not accomplishing the task of educating kids. We're going to have safe classrooms. We are hearing that more and more teachers are leaving the profession because they're getting beat up in the classroom and nothing's being done about it. All the other stuff that we want to talk about, Steve, none of that makes any difference. If you don't have a strong educational system, we're going to make that happen.
Yeah. No, I can see the enthusiasm and the authenticity in you. And I hope that that's evident to all the voters in Wisconsin. I think it will be, at least by Election Day. Now, traditionally, education has been the domain of the Democrats, right? Republicans have seldom, if ever, run on education. You think there's a legitimate chance in this race that you can run successfully on this issue?
For me, it isn't just a political position. This is heartfelt. My wife and I have 3 daughters. We both volunteered in our kids' schools, and our kids went to the local public schools in northern Wisconsin. They got a good education there. They had a lot of really good teachers. But we volunteered there. from 2nd through 4th grade, all 3 of my daughters, I went in every week and read to the kids. I am like so many Wisconsinites. We know our kids have to be educated well, especially they have to be able to read well. So this is visceral for me. This has to be fixed. And it has been proven under Governor Evers and the Democrats that they're not going to fix it. Their fix is always, let's just shovel more money. And we put in plenty of money as taxpayers of Wisconsin. Now we need accountability. We need to make sure that the taxpayers of Wisconsin, the parents here in Wisconsin, that they are getting results. And that's what I'm going to ensure as governor. And I don't care whether kids go to private, public, parochial, or they homeschool. Every kid, regardless of their zip code in Wisconsin, they should get a good education. And I'm going to work every day to make sure that that happens. And it's going to be a top priority.
Yeah. Let me ask you about that school choice, because Wisconsin was very advanced in the school choice movement, right, early. And it was a bipartisan issue, right? There were significant influential Democrats who pushed for it initially. Now it's the opposite. All of your potential opponents in the crowded Democratic primary are against school choice.
For some reason, it was made a litmus test for Democrats, and they just will not do it. I mean, take a look at the $1,700 scholarship that was authorized federally that I voted for that would cost taxpayers nothing here in Wisconsin, and you could put that money into any school, including a public school, and Governor Evers vetoed it. Right. Vetoed $1,700 of free money that could go to these students regardless of their zip code. They're more concerned about the system than they are about students.
Congressman, we're sitting right now in Milwaukee, and in this city, there is the largest race achievement gap in all of America. The left claims to be, and the Democrats claim to be, the champions of minorities, and yet minorities are falling behind in an alarming way. What are your thoughts about that situation?
Good intentions, as stated by Democrats, need to be followed up with real results, and they haven't. And this is why we cannot have a Democrat as our next governor, because they want to end school choice. I mean, school choice has been a lifeline for thousands of kids here in Milwaukee for 3 decades. We're going to make sure we get accountability from all levels, and one of the ways to accomplish that is with the choice schools. And we're going to continue to fight for them and all schools in Wisconsin to be high achievers.
Yeah. You mentioned social engineering. It seems to me that a lot of school administrators particularly, but the bureaucratic side of education, they are more focused on political narrative than they are on truly educating children. Are there too many politics in Wisconsin public schools?
I think a lot of school administrators do a good job. I think the ultimate failure is the Department of Public Instruction. As I talk to administrators, they're really tired of this whole social engineering concept that has been going on in the Department of Public Instruction, starting way back when Tony Evers was there, continuing now with the current person that's leading the Department of Public Instruction. It is time to end that and get back to the basics of educating our children well.
Okay. Congressman, what would be your message to teachers?
We're going to make sure you're safe in the classroom. That's number one. We're not going to allow this undisciplined approach that has been going on. And by the way, I'm going to back up administrators. I'm going to say to them, if you insist on having discipline in your classroom, I will back you up.
Yeah. So regarding property taxes, I do a lot of polling of your state, and one of the most negative aspects of Wisconsin right now for voters, for citizens, is property taxes. What will a Governor Tiffany do to ease the property tax burden?
First thing I'll do when elected is I'll call a special session in the legislature. We're going to end the 400-year property tax increase. That will bring property taxes down, and then we're going to freeze them. I was in the legislature a decade ago when we had property taxes frozen. It made home ownership more affordable. Some local officials will question, okay, so what are we going to do if property taxes are frozen? You look at the last state budget, it went from $98 billion to $114 billion. There's not a revenue problem in Madison. Madison can help out with the shared revenue side for these local units of government.
Excellent. Tom, Tiffany, thank you so much for this.
Great to join you, Steve.
Appreciate it. Wisconsin taxpayers are understandably super frustrated with these dismal results, especially compared to the giant increases in funding. For instance, polling shows that only 8% of voters, just 8%, rate Wisconsin schools as excellent, while 50% say the performance is fair or even poor. In that same polling, property tax burdens are by far the biggest source of economic anxiety for Wisconsinites when it comes to taxes. Perhaps that unhappiness explains why 76% of voters say that education will be very important in selecting the next governor of that state.
Katie Kalewords is a mother of 3 and a local Wisconsin school board member. Casey Chalfant, she's a mother of 3 and the homeschool teacher of her children. Katie, thank you so much for doing this. So tell us, what motivates you as a citizen, as a mom, what motivated you to serve on the school board?
What got me really started was my oldest. She was in kindergarten in 2020. That's when I really started to see like what they were doing in school. Because, you know, you go home and then it's virtual. And going forward from that, she was below grade level in math. And her teacher was like, well, I'm concerned about middle school. I am too. And that's when I really like woke up the next day and like felt called to run.
Well, good for you. It's incredible to me and really kind of inspiring how many parents got activated by the lockdowns, and good for you to take real action. So, Casey, thank you for doing this.
Absolutely.
And you're the mother and the teacher because you've chosen to homeschool. Tell us about that choice.
So we knew before we ever had kids that we were going to homeschool. My husband and I both went public school. My husband's a doctor. I also went to college. Just something that we felt really strongly about. Our faith is something we put foremost in our family and how we do life. So for us, that was our biggest motivator. As a mom and an educator, we get to see all of the everyday gains and struggles. And it is the coolest thing ever to see your kids thrive in the environment that is more structured to them.
Yeah. Even as you homeschool, though, Casey, you clearly want K-12 public education to be really strong.
It needs to be, because not everybody wants to homeschool or has the option to. And everybody needs that accessibility, but so many kids are being pushed through where they can't read, they can't write.
Right.
Cursive has been gone for how many years? I learned it when I was in K-12. And I mean, my gosh, Declaration of Independence, what's it written in?
Right. Cursive,
So,
yeah.
It's...
So, let me follow up on that point, because I think it's really important, Katie. The Department of Public Instruction, the state superintendent of education, basically, not only did they lower the standards, but they did it largely in secrecy.
Yes.
I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
I think it's appalling. It makes it so that our scores are so inflated. Like following the year that they did that, we had a 14.8% jump year to year in our scores in our district.
It's impossible.
Right, it's not possible. And if you put all of the years together, you will see that that's not normal. Like, that's unprecedented. How are we supposed to trust that and trust where we're sending them if they are keeping things from us?
Katie, let me ask you about this, the lack of, let's call it return on investment, right? In other words, spending has gone up dramatically in Wisconsin on education, while the results have gotten worse.
It's really sad. It's kind of sad. Like, where is it actually going? Across the country, public schools have declining enrollment. But if you look at it, there's a steep incline in administration hires. Why do we need more administration if we have less children? So I don't think it's fair to put all of this on the taxpayers.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So let me ask you, Casey, it seems to me in this election year in Wisconsin that there's an opportunity for Republicans to run on education. What are your thoughts?
There is. And I think it's one of those things where it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on right now. It's that end of the day, parents want an education for their kids, period. And it's as simple as that.
Tell me too, though, because we've been talking about, the difficulty of Wisconsin right now and the challenges Wisconsin faces, but it's also an amazing state. So, Casey, what do you love about Wisconsin?
For me, it's the snow. Hands down, I love snow, the skiing, snow, anything you can do outdoors is key. But then you have the hot summers, you have fall. I mean, you get a little bit of everything.
Does the current trend in education, though, worry you about the future of Wisconsin?
It does make me nervous. I think it's scaring a lot of people.
Sure.
To where they don't have another option. Right now, I would say Democrats and the left are more concerned about the gender ideology than they are about what your kids are learning. They want to talk about having these goofy bathrooms. than actually educating our kids on the things that matter. It's woken a lot of moms up. And if anybody is, I would say, a scarier facet, it's a mom on a mission in regards to her kids.
Sure. So, Katie, you're also a Wisconsin lifer. So tell us, what do you love about Wisconsin?
The Midwestern kindness. I think that's something that really is, it just thrives here.
Sure. Do you worry, though, at the same time, that what makes Wisconsin special can be destroyed if you don't fix education?
Very much so. The kids that are being brought up now, that's our next generation. They're going to be in charge of all of us. Like when we're old and gray, they're going to be in charge of everything. And if they aren't taught well now, they're not going to know how.
Sure. Yeah. What's your advice for Tom Tiffany regarding education?
Pay attention to the areas where, what are these homeschool groups doing? What are these Montessori style schools doing? It's hands-on. They do not use tablets. They don't use computers. They're developing that frontal lobe of their brain, like that critical processing of how do I do this? Not how do I do this math problem, but they're doing math in cooking. They're doing math in building this. Why are people moving their kids from a traditional classroom setting to a Montessori style school? Because it works.
Katie, let me ask you that same question. What is your advice for Tom Tiffany running for governor?
I would love for him to look into the data, right? Look into the data of where our public schools are at currently, and then compare it to the other different types of education that we offer, like homeschooling, like charter schools, like private schools. What are they doing that's different? And how do we apply that to our public schools?
Well, listen, thank you both. You're both obviously caring, dedicated mothers. You're both patriots. You're both really involved. And your voices are needed, and appreciate everything you're doing.
Well, thank you. We appreciate having been here.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. You know, all across America, we want the best for our children. Every patriot does. Certainly parents and grandparents, but even those without children who just want our society to thrive and our country to be great, who want a future of prosperity and patriotism and success. Teachers across Wisconsin and across the nation, they yearn to fully foster the potential of each child. But they cannot succeed with corrupt, inept administrators and politicians becoming hurdles in the way of classroom excellence. America is in the midst of an educational crisis, a storm. We won't fix it unless we first acknowledge it and then take bold actions to make solutions real and tangible. Now, do some of these solutions involve electing Republicans, the party not normally known for education? I'm talking about genuine reformers like Tom Tiffany. I suspect so. But to the wonderful people of Wisconsin, to parents, educators, and citizens everywhere, the ball is in your court into November. Which way for our children?
So my guest tonight is a man that you know from television. He's spent the last few years doing what almost nobody on television does. He picks up the camera and he tells the truth, and he goes to the heartland. He goes to where the people are, people like you and me, the everyday Americans, the ones who are most affected by all of the policies made in DC or in our state capitals. He tells the real story, and that's why I admire him so much. Steve Cortes is a Chicago native, so not too far from me in Wisconsin, a Georgetown man, a former Wall Street market strategist who left the trading floor for the front lines. You've seen him on CNBC, CNN, Fox News, Newsmax. You've seen him everywhere. He was a senior advisor and spokesman for President Trump in 2016 and 2020. He has served on the White House Commission on Hispanic Prosperity and was senior media advisor to J.D. Vance's Senate campaign. I mean, what haven't you done? So thank you, Steve, for coming on. And I'm really excited to talk about this documentary. It's about education and Wisconsin. So two things that are very important to me. So thanks for joining us.
Of course, no, and important to you, and important to everyone in Wisconsin. I think especially important to moms, and that's one of the reasons we did this documentary. Is I think it's a way for Republicans to reach those suburban moms, a demographic where we struggled in recent years. But we want to point out that the Democrats, while they claim to be the party of education, actually everywhere they're in charge, including in Wisconsin, standards are falling fast. Performance is falling even faster. They're trying to lower the standards so that the performance doesn't look as bad. We talk a lot about that happening in the state of Wisconsin. And the reality is, in a state where the Democrats have complete control, and in terms of education, really have had complete control now, I think you can say in some ways for 16 years, because Governor Evers is finishing his second term as governor. But before that, he was head of the Department of Public Instruction, DPI, which runs education in the state of Wisconsin, 2 terms there. So you can really say for 16 years, Evers has largely run education. The Democrats have run education in Wisconsin. And the unfortunate reality is your state, which used to be an exemplar state, used to be one of the best states in America for education, was actually known nationwide for superb public schools. That has changed dramatically for the worse, unfortunately.
Is that the reason why you picked Wisconsin? You do these documentaries everywhere around the country. Why Wisconsin?
Yes, no, great question. First of all, I love your state, and you're right. I spent most of my life in Chicago, so right next door. I think northern Wisconsin, specifically in the summertime, I always tell people I think is the most wonderful part of America, maybe of the world. Just the rolling green hills, the lakes, the dairy farms. It is so picturesque and wonderful. And of course, the people are amazing. But politically speaking, too, it's not just my affinity for Wisconsin and my knowledge of the state. It's also that politically speaking, Wisconsin is the most contested battleground state in America. So, if you look at sort of the 7 traditional battlegrounds, the tightest of the 7 for the last 3 cycles has been Wisconsin. I suspect it might well be again in 2028. And so this is a state where those of us who are involved in campaign politics, always have a focus. And in 2026, we see an incredible opportunity with an open governor's seat, particularly. And we think a superb nominee in Tom Tiffany, somebody who is very focused on education. And what I saw there is once I started looking at the metrics and seeing that Wisconsin had declined so much that more than 2/3, basically 70% of 4th graders can't read at grade level in a state like Wisconsin, which again used to excel at education. That was pretty shocking to me. And this isn't just a Milwaukee story. It's not just an inner city story. It's happening, unfortunately, all over the state. I highlighted in my documentary. It's happening in Eau Claire, which for folks watching who don't know much about Eau Claire, Wisconsin, that's more like a big suburb, really. It's not someplace we would call all that urban. I mean, yes, it's a metro area, but it's not an urban place. Their test scores are declining hard. Now, thankfully, they're coming down from a much better place in Eau Claire than they started in Milwaukee. But the point is, the trend is not our friend right now for Wisconsin children and for Wisconsin parents. And on top of that, Scarlett, what I saw is in Wisconsin, not only are the results declining, but the spending is increasing massively. And I found in my polling, I do a lot of polling of these battleground states, and I probably have polled Wisconsin more than any other state in America. Actually, I'm sure I have. And I found out that people's number one angst regarding taxation is property taxes, that property taxes have been soaring in Wisconsin. Most people, I think, realize, or I hope they do, that property taxes are primarily funding education. So spending more and more for worse and worse results. Nobody likes that equation. That doesn't work. It's not a bargain for Wisconsin taxpayers. And I think there's an opportunity here for Republicans to take leadership on this issue and say, we're not going to surrender this issue of education anymore. And I think it's a winning issue for Republicans broadly, for Tom Tiffany, I think specifically for governor, but also more importantly than just election politics. I want to see a place where the children of Wisconsin are prepared to succeed in this digital age, where they have the kinds of skills they need, the kind of reading, writing, arithmetic skills to be really productive, successful citizens. Also to have the right values, right? What we're doing now in way too many public schools in Wisconsin and elsewhere is we are indoctrinating kids with leftist nonsense, but not teaching them the hard skills they need to be successful in this knowledge-based economy. So, overarching, by the way, beyond my electoral aims and the campaign hat that I often wear, I also, care deeply about the children all over this country, including Wisconsin, and I want those children and their families to be empowered to succeed. And right now, that's not happening.
You mentioned Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and so I was looking up real fast, and I'm sure you've heard this story, but in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Just a few years ago, there was a big controversy because hanging up on the doors of the middle schools in Eau Claire were signs like this: if your parents aren't accepting of your gender identity, I'm your mom now.
Wow.
So this and many reasons, Eau Claire has become embroiled in identity politics, critical race theory, and gender ideology. So rather than teaching kids their basics, reading, writing, and STEM, all of the things that you've mentioned, they're more focused on all of this political stuff. They're turning classrooms into these indoctrination camps where they can churn out the foot soldiers for the left. Because of that, even in these suburban areas that used to have really high scores, we're seeing those scores plummet. Right. And that's why it used to be, I've lived here all my life, save for 12 years. I was a Navy wife, so we lived all over the world, but I always came back home and visited Wisconsin. And when we were done, I made Wisconsin my home again. And I've raised my kids here, 5 kids. They've gone to public schools, they've gone to private schools, we've done everything. But I've seen firsthand the way education is just so dramatically shifted from this focus on the basics and providing kids with good education, especially in the suburban areas, to what we have now, where we're removing STEM classes and replacing them with a lot more DEI, soft classes. And it was shocking to me until COVID, till my eyes were opened up and I got to see behind the scenes. And Tony Evers, you're right, for 16 years, he has been absolutely destroying education in Wisconsin.
Yeah, no, that's the unfortunate reality. And I'm so glad that you bring this up, by the way, because it's really important. When we take our eyes off of what is the real agenda, what are the real goals of educating citizens, I think first of all, it should be to care for them and their minds and make sure that they have the hard skills to succeed, right? So that they are competent and skilled in reading, writing, and proficient in math, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic. The 3 R's, should still predominate in schools, and they still do in some good schools, but in way too many schools, both public and private, by the way. And sometimes the private schools on this cultural indoctrination are even worse than some of the public schools. So don't assume that just because your children are going to a private school, sometimes even a private, supposedly religious school, believe me, look into what the curriculum is actually teaching your children, because in too many of those schools, cultural indoctrination, unfortunately, takes precedence over caring for these children in a real way and forming them into being intelligent, skilled adults who could be productive members of society. I would argue, in addition to that, though, on the cultural part, what schools used to do in the United States and need to do again is also form young patriots who appreciate this country and want to make this country even better into the future rather than denigrate this country. And what we see there, those were some shocking examples that you showed, Scarlett, and we have to expose what's going on in these schools. Look, anybody who talks about sexual matters to a young child, who is not their own child, in my view, is a pervert, okay? I mean, you have something wrong with you. You are a creep if you want to talk to somebody else's young child about sexual matters. That is not your responsibility. It is not your right in any way. And in fact, something's really wrong with you if you seek to do that. But unfortunately, a lot of people who call themselves educators are doing exactly that. And the results, I'm glad you mentioned this again, because, again, in Eau Claire, compared to, say, Milwaukee, yes, we started at a higher level, right? Test scores used to be outstanding in the Eau Claire area. But the point is, they are declining at almost the same rate as Milwaukee. So, yes, they're still higher, perhaps, than inner city, but they're plummeting at the same kind of rate, the same kind of poor outcomes. And I think so much of it is because way too many people who call themselves educators, way too many politicians like Governor Evers, who claim to be Democrats in favor of or proponents of education in their state and in our country. What are they really after? They're really after cultural indoctrination, unfortunately. And by the way, in terms of the failures, I think here's what's also very revealing. And I make sure to point this out in the documentary because I think this very much exposes the Democrats and their hypocrisy when it comes to education. The widest achievement gap between Black students and white students in all of America is found in Wisconsin. It is found specifically in Milwaukee, but even statewide, the widest gap in America. So in a state that is run by Democrats right now, I think that's going to change come November, but a state that is run by Democrats, Democrats who again claim to be the advocates and proponents of minorities in the United States, claim to look up for the people who have otherwise had disadvantages in life, including urban minorities. Guess what? They are flailing in Wisconsin right now, the widest achievement gap in America. I also point out, by the way, if you want to look for a state who's doing this right, and this might surprise a lot of people, it's Mississippi. So Mississippi, one of the poorer states in America, who used to have some of the worst education outcomes. Scarlett, they have really gone back to basics in that state. They've gone back to phonics for young children to make sure they can read. Because the thing is, if a child can't read effectively when they're young, statistically, the unfortunate reality is they just never catch up. They just never do. I mean, they are behind. They might get graduated. They might graduate high school, but they're not proficient in reading and writing and arithmetic. That's just the reality. But if you teach phonics at a young age, particularly the kids who are struggling with reading, we know how to fix this. They're doing it in Mississippi, and Mississippi shot from the bottom of every educational scale all the way to near the top. And Mississippi's educational scores right now, test scores, are far above Wisconsin's. And I think that would shock a lot of folks in Wisconsin who maybe still have a legacy bias and still think of their state as being a strong education state. That's just not true on the whole. I would also add on top of that, recently, I'm sure a lot of your viewers have seen, certainly your Wisconsin audience has seen some of the shocking footage of the violence come out of the state fair in Wisconsin. Well, unfortunately, that kind of mayhem, that's not only isolated to sort of public venues like the Wisconsin State Fair, that's also happening in the classrooms. And one of the things that Tom Tiffany, when I interviewed him in this documentary, one of the things that he told me, he said, priority number one for me is I'm going to make sure that teachers are safe. He said, I can't tell you how many teachers have told me they are leaving the profession or want to leave the profession because they fear for their personal safety. I mean, how can you possibly teach effectively when you're literally worried about your safety in the classroom? So, that, of course, also must be addressed and hasn't been addressed at all, hasn't been fixed remotely by the Democrats in Wisconsin. So look, the unfortunate reality is the state of education right now in Wisconsin is in a really bad place. Again, more than 2/3 of students in Wisconsin are not proficient at grade level, according to state standardized testings. Perhaps almost as bad as that reality is the fact that Wisconsin state educational officials, the Department of Public Instruction specifically, they held a big boondoggle event at a water park in the Wisconsin Dells, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to, in secret, move the goalposts. So they literally said, okay, not enough kids are passing the tests, or not enough kids are attaining what we call proficiency at grade level. Well, let's just change the standards. Let's move the goalpost, right? If the kicker can't quite make, it's almost football season, right? If the kicker can't quite make that field goal, well, let's just move the goalpost to the 10-yard line instead of on the backyard line. And then that kicker's going to make it. And we're going to pretend that he did something. No, that doesn't work in real life, of course. Doesn't work in sports. Certainly shouldn't work in education. But this needs to be exposed. And I think, once it is, and thankfully, so far, my doc's getting a lot of traction. That's not the only way to expose it, of course, but it's one of the ways we do this. And look, it's my honor to get to go around the country and tell regular people's stories and tell important stories about topics that typically corporate media is going to ignore. And most of the legacy corporate media in Wisconsin, let's face it, they do whatever the power brokers in Madison and Milwaukee tell them to do. So it's important for us to go to other places in the state and go talk to regular people, to moms, to educators, and to politicians, and ask them about, hey, what's important to them? What's going wrong in this state? How can we fix it again? Here's the great news, too, though. I don't want to be all negative. The great news is Wisconsin was, as I mentioned, it was an exemplar state. It can be again. Okay, Wisconsin can get there again. If Mississippi can do it, by the way, from the bottom of every educational metric to the top, Wisconsin can absolutely do it. I think it's in the DNA of Wisconsin. I think it's the kind of state that has a culture that just deeply cares about families and children and wants children to succeed, that used to be really proud of the schools there. And on top of that, as I mentioned, you're spending a fortune. Okay, so just from an economic perspective, right? And I mean, of course, I want to look at the human side of this too, but just from the financial side of this, if you're investing, let's get a return on investment, okay? And you're investing a ton. Property taxes have soared in Wisconsin, really stressing out Wisconsin homeowners. I think that those increases should go backwards, but regardless, the point is, when you're investing a lot, demand great outcomes. Not getting that right now in schooling in Wisconsin.
Yes. And so to rewind, to talk about the water park, $386,000 was spent on a 4-day convention in a resort in Wisconsin Dells, in a big, huge, if you're in Wisconsin, Wisconsin Dells is just this huge area where families go, but they had just this over like nearly $400,000 was spent at a 4-day convention in which they made the decision that rather than do the hard work, roll up their sleeves and figure out why are public schools failing Wisconsin's children? What can we do? They had this clandestine meeting where those who attended had to sign NDAs. And you talk about this in your documentary. You talk to Jake Curtis. Can you talk a little bit more about this shocking reveal? I mean, I know about this, but I think a lot of regular Wisconsinites do not know about this. It wasn't reported on.
Yeah, no, and it's understandable because corporate media didn't talk about it much. And look, regular people are busy. They don't have time to look into, okay, what's DPI doing? Where's it told in his meetings? So thankfully, Jake Curtis has done incredible work on this. He's an attorney, being very aggressive. By the way, trying very hard to get a detailed accounting because we want to know exactly how did you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars at a water park. I know, listen, Wisconsinites like their brats and their beer. Was it that? But we want to see. This is public money, right? This is taxpayer money. And again, if that's not bad enough, but done in secrecy. You mentioned that they had to sign non-disclosure agreements just to participate. So they invite in, supposed experts who are going to basically help them move those goalposts, help them say, how can we figure out, instead of figuring out how do we better educate children? How do we empower teachers more? How do we make sure classrooms are safe? No, instead they're saying, how do we meet standards that we're not really meeting, right? How do we cook the books, essentially? And because we're doing that, by the way, we're going to do it in secret. I mean, I can't even imagine inviting educational experts to a conference and saying you have to sign a confidentiality agreement. I mean, that's absurd, right? This isn't national security. You know what I mean? This isn't the NSA holding a conference on hacking where, okay, maybe you need NDAs to get signed. This is talking about the education of our children. If anything, it should have been totally transparent, right? The whole thing should have been streamed, right? I mean, it should have been available to the public. And Jake Curtis, God bless him, is, really, I think more than anyone exposed this. And more than anybody else that I know of in the state is still digging, suing, trying to get as much information as we can out of this group, which prefers to operate in darkness. Now, to some degree, I understand that they want to operate in darkness because the results are so damning, right, of what they have actually done with the money they've been entrusted with the minds of young children they've been entrusted with. And I to a degree, understand the fact that they want to hide. But I think the good citizens of Wisconsin just simply can't allow them to hide. And people like me who do investigative work can't allow them to hide. And good attorneys who care about the state and care about children like Jake Curtis, are saying, no, we demand transparency here. This is not your money. It's the state of Wisconsin's money. These are not all your children. They're the children of the parents of this state. And you brought up a great point earlier, too, Scarlett. It's so important that a lot of eyes were opened of parents during COVID. And one of the only positives, there was almost nothing positive to come out of those ridiculous lockdowns and the COVID panic. But one of the only significant positives, I think, is that it did expose the educational curricula of a lot of schools to parents, because all of a sudden it was on a laptop on their kitchen table, right? Rather than junior going off to school and you're not really sure what they're being taught for those 7 or 8 hours. So if there was any positive, it's that it was exposed. And I think we learned, unfortunately, that there's way too much woke cultural indoctrination at way too many schools, public and private, in the United States. Not enough instruction in the basics of real education, sort of old school, Little House on the Prairie, schoolroom, pencil and paper kind of education that produces great results and produces young people, young adults who are ready to be great citizens of this country. But thankfully, because it woke parents up, homeschooling has exploded, for one thing. There's a lot more parents running for school boards, serving on school boards, a lot more proper scrutiny of what is being taught in the classroom, a lot more questioning of teachers, of textbooks, of curricula, all of this. And I think all of that is going to accelerate in Wisconsin. But I only think it's going to accelerate if we replace leadership in Madison, because you've got a great state that is led by some really corrupt, inept people who don't care about your children. And the test scores show it. I mean, look, this is not Steve Cortes' opinion. I mean, the test scores unfortunately show it. And listen, let me say too, this is a nationwide problem, clearly. And you're showing it there. The test scores have dropped dramatically since the COVID panic. They bounced back, but not much. We're not even close to 2019 levels by most metrics. So it is happening nationwide. But I think it's going to be particularly shocking to Wisconsin folks because, again, Wisconsin started at a better place and then declined rapidly, unfortunately. And I think also shocking, and I hope this can earn over some people who consider themselves to be independents or perhaps even Democrats, the fact that the widest gap in America between black and white child achievement is in Wisconsin.
Yep.
That's something that Wisconsin should be ashamed of, frankly, but that Wisconsin should get busy about fixing. And I think can get busy about fixing that, but you can't fix the problem unless you first identify it and then come up with reasonable and workable solutions. I think all of that can happen. Wisconsin is a swing state, even though it's run by Democrats right now. We know Donald Trump won Wisconsin, of course, in 2024. I project that it's going to be a very tight swing state again in 28. I believe the Republicans will win it in 28, but first things first, this November 2026. And let's make sure that this coming school year, Americans are just getting back to school right now in most places or about to. Let's make sure that children are truly educated, that they are cared for, that they're loved, that they're taught reading, writing, and arithmetic, that they're not indoctrinated with woke cultural nonsense, that they're certainly not taught to hate our country, or taught that in any way this country is anything but the greatest gift that they could have been given in terms of an inheritance, a place to be born. And if we do that, I think it's incumbent on us, those of us who are involved in the political field, who are involved in campaigns, but even people who aren't necessarily involved in politics, Scarlett, just caring citizens, especially parents, but also you don't have to be a parent, right, to care a lot about education. If you just care about the future of your state, the future of your country, you have to care about education. And then on top of that, the financial investment, right? Anyone who lives anywhere, because even if you don't own your property, you're indirectly paying the property taxes through your landlord, right? So everybody's paying for these schools. And in the case of Wisconsin, paying pretty lavishly and getting bad results. So, we wouldn't accept that in our business life. We wouldn't accept it in our investment life. Let's definitely not accept it when it comes to the outcomes for our children.
Yes. And right now, and this is just a list of some of the Milwaukee schools, and you can see the percent meeting ELA standards in 2025, proficient. So reading proficiently, 2.3%, 2.5%, 2.9%. These are abysmal. These are just they're beyond failing. They're horrific. And we have here nearly half of Wisconsin's lowest performing schools are in Milwaukee.
Right.
Again, Milwaukee County. And when at the time of your documentary, Congressman Tom Tiffany was the presumed GOP gubernatorial candidate. Since then, just recently, we had our primary election. He is now the official GOP primary candidate, the official GOP gubernatorial candidate. And he's going to be squaring off against David Crowley, who is to this day right now, he is the Milwaukee County executive. He was in the assembly. So MPS, he has, his record on spending and what he's done in education is just abysmal. And so when you talk about MPS, we have Tom Tiffany squaring off against David Crowley, who has contributed to all of this failure in the Milwaukee public school system.
Yeah, exactly right, Scarlett. You're making such an important point here. And David Crowley, quite properly, is going to have to own and wear the record of failure in Milwaukee schools specifically. So statewide, there's a problem, but of course, it's worse in Milwaukee. And he has to own that abysmal record. And Tom Tiffany and others who are running against him need to do a very good job of exposing it with the facts and the truth about exactly what has happened there. And, those schools that you showed with those just abysmally, just embarrassing proficiency rates, think about what those children are going to be facing, and those young adults, for the high schoolers, but children for the elementary schools. Think of what they're going to be facing. If you're heading into a world and you can't even read proficiently, in this economy that we're in now, right? It's almost impossible to make a solid living any longer with just the sweat of your brow, right? There was a time in America, a time in the world where if you were just willing to work hard, just through physical strength and exertion, you could make a reasonable living. That is not the world we live in anymore. That is not the economy that we operate in today. Because even people who have blue collar jobs now, they work with their minds and their hands, right? Because they're using machinery and computers for tasks that used to only be physical. So it is impossible. It is an impossibility to be a successful person, to be able to afford the kind of life you will want for yourself and hopefully for a spouse and for children, if you're not proficient in reading, as an absolute baseline, right? You need more than that, of course, but as an absolute baseline. So the unfortunate reality is, if you project into the future, for those 98% of students in those schools who are not proficient, what kind of a future are they going to have? Well, it's probably going to be mostly a very sad one, probably one filled with a lot of failures, perhaps addictions, crime, but the prognosis is not good for you in this economy if you don't have these basic skills. So why would we ever doom young people to that kind of future? And by the way, many of them, of course, are minorities. Many of them are Black and brown people, the people that David Crowley claims to represent. And just because he's black skinned, though, I'm not going to let him off the hook and say, okay, you're not responsible for the failures for Black children in your jurisdiction. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And, look, in some ways, I think Republicans were pining to have Francesca Hong as the Democrat nominee, because I think in terms of some of her public statements, perhaps she seems slightly more radical than David Crowley. But the reality is Crowley, and he has said this himself, has almost all of the same positions as Hong. He's as radical as she is. He might not speak in quite as radical a way, but he's as radical as she is in terms of policies. But he also has the added problem or the additional hurdle that she didn't have of he's responsible for Milwaukee. He's responsible particularly for the educational failures of Milwaukee. And he's going to have to explain to the rest of Wisconsin, hey, I'm going to bring the Milwaukee education model to the rest of the state. Okay, well, how's that going to work? How's that going to work out for northern Wisconsin and southwestern Wisconsin and all over the state? And by the way, let's fix Milwaukee while we're at it. Nobody wants to write off the biggest city, of course, in the state, especially with this glaring white-black proficiency gap, in that city. So, I think it will be a really important campaign issue for Tom Tiffany into these closing weeks and closing months, and making that closing argument and a way for him to win over, I think, particularly a lot of suburban type voters. The GOP has had a hard time, for example, with college educated suburban women. That's been a tough demographic for the GOP. I think this is an issue where Tom Tiffany can rightly earn their support, where you can say, hey, this doesn't have anything to do with MAGA. This doesn't have anything to do with Donald Trump if you don't like Donald Trump. This has to do with the children of Wisconsin. Yeah. And this has to do with our future as a state and the money we're investing and what little return we're getting for it. And I think it's a way for him to pick up some of those swing voters who are going to both be turned off by the radicalism of the Democrats, but also, demand better for their children or their grandchildren in schools. And I think there's real opportunity here, specifically in this race. Some other states around the country have similar profiles, but specifically in this race, because you have had Democrats in charge, you've had educational attainment fall off a cliff with spending surge. That to me is the recipe, as a campaign guy, for a winning issue where we can both win the race, but then also, more importantly, really do some good for the citizens of Wisconsin, for the children of Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, in Milwaukee, and I'm reading the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, they do every year an apples to apples report. And every year, Milwaukee public schools they just rank the lowest. And Wisconsin has the widest gap between Black and white students of any state in America. So not only is MPS failing in Wisconsin, nationwide, it is dead last. I mean, this is a crown that I don't want Wisconsin to wear. This is a horrible, notable, quote unquote, achievement. It's horrific. And it's not about money, because Milwaukee MPS, they spend a great deal of money, up to $18,000 per student, way more than a lot of suburban schools. They're infused with money. They have federal dollars, they get state dollars, there's grants, there's Title I, there's all sorts of funding that they get on top of the funding formula that was created in Madison that absolutely no one understands. I've testified there, and you need an actuarialist to try and understand this confusing funding formula. But all you ever hear is, we need more money, we need more money. Well, they're not using it to protect the teachers or the children, because they're removing security officers, claiming that they want to defund the police. Again, putting ideology before the safety of both the staff and the students. But they're more concerned with having, gender identity coloring books and DEI lessons, and having kids march around, the school against ICE. I mean, we saw that all over Milwaukee public schools over the winter, where students who can't even read at a grade proficient level are giving speeches. Someone typed up a speech and gave them a microphone so they could protest ICE. It's absolutely shocking and sickening to see what Democrats have done with education. Again, they are looking at our classrooms as a place where they could build their army instead of a place where they could build the future's productive citizens of our state and of our country.
Yeah, no, you're making such an important point, Scarlett. Listen, we want our children to be proficient in math, not in Marxism, right? That's the reality. And too many of them, we have that inverted, right? Or at least the educators want that to be inverted. So we want kids who are very skilled at spewing leftist ideology slogans and at holding up signs that were made for them at a concocted protest, but not very skilled at sitting down with pencil and paper and figuring out basic math problems, right? Or be able to write a clear, concise sentence, or or knowing the meaning of words, just being proficient in reading. So that's where we need to focus again. And again, too, though, I want to emphasize, yes, it is at its worst in Milwaukee, but it's a statewide problem. I was pretty shocked, frankly, when I did the research for this, when I started looking at how much test scores are falling, even in upper income areas, in rural areas, in suburbia, all over the state. Okay, now again, they're falling from a higher baseline in those places at least, so it's not quite as tragic yet, but the trend is not good, and that trend has to be stopped and reversed. And again, the opposite. So as the test scores are going down, the property taxes are soaring higher, right? This is the wrong formula. These two things are going in the wrong direction. So we need to get control in Wisconsin over those property taxes, which are out of hand, and we need those test scores to go back up and catch back up to the spending, which I think can happen. I mean, I really do. I think that it can happen. It will happen. By the way, when you mentioned the public safety aspect too, and the cops and security guards being taken out of Milwaukee public schools, I actually interviewed back in 2024 when I was working on behalf of Donald Trump with outside groups, but working on behalf of Trump. And we knew Wisconsin was going to be such an important state. It was, in fact, the closest state in 2024. We won all the swing states, but that was the most narrow victory, was Wisconsin. I interviewed 2 Black moms in the city of Milwaukee, and they were just fantastic. They were represented by Wisconsin Law and Liberty Center, actually, in the lawsuits. They were suing to get the cops and the security guards put back in, because these were Black moms who say, we're worried about the safety of our children. And the administrators claim that it's racist to have security, that it's racist to have cops, in and around the buildings. It's the opposite, actually, right, of racist, because a lot of these places aren't safe, which, again, we know it from the teachers as well, that they don't feel safe. No one can learn in an environment that's not safe, right? I mean, that's an absolute basic necessity, of course, to feel safe and loved so that you can learn. Then on top of it, we need to do the learning in a proper way. And I would argue, by the way, to most Wisconsinites, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Honestly, just look at Mississippi. Look at what they're doing there, particularly regarding phonics. Because again, reading is the foundation. If a child can't successfully read by the time they're into middle school, in all likelihood, statistically, and this is the sad reality, we know that they will just never catch up. They will never catch up, all the way into adulthood. They may not even finish high school, but even if they do, they just got passed along and they graduated, but they're not proficient. By the way, that's also a shocking statistic that I've looked at all over the country. I used to look at this a lot in Chicago. I used to live. How many kids are graduating, sometimes even graduating with reasonably high GPAs, but are not proficient? Okay, so what does that tell you? Again, we're just changing the goalposts. We're just saying, well, you don't actually have to reach the standard. We're going to graduate you. We'll give you a B. We're going to pretend it's fine. Our graduation rate soars, and we brag about having a high graduation rate. But wait a second. But the test scores show you're graduating from high school. You're supposed to be a 12th grade proficient, and you're actually 6th grade proficient in reading, right? So that is a marked sign of failure that I used to study a lot in Chicago. It's unfortunately becoming the reality in Wisconsin now too. I would warn you of this as a guy who lived most of my life in Illinois. And I know this from my polling. Wisconsinites do not want to become Illinois, right? You don't want to become your neighbor. You also don't want to become Minneapolis. You don't want to become the Twin Cities, right? You don't want to become the nonsense there on immigration and all the woke nonsense and the mass scamming of the citizens of that state from third world migrants. You don't want to become them. You don't want to become Chicago with the dangers of Chicago. And I say this is somebody who lived in Chicago for 50 years. I love Chicago. The crazies finally chased me out of there, like a lot of people. But to Wisconsinites, I would say right now, you're on track to becoming Illinois. You are on track to becoming Chicago. You have time, though. Not a lot of time, but you have time to reverse that. And I strongly suggest, as a former Chicagoan, that you do, because that's not your future. I don't think it's really who you are culturally, politically, and there. Although the clock is ticking, there is time for you to reverse that unfortunate trend.
No, you're 100% right. We do not want to become Minneapolis or Illinois, Chicago. I have too many friends that live in those states or they're refugees from those states who have moved to Wisconsin, and they see the writing on the wall. So this is our moment in 2026. We really need to show up, because we do not want to let the barbarians inside of the gates. They already have too much already. There is a chance to turn it around, like you said, but we have to. We absolutely must be engaged and involved and make sure that the right candidates are in office to protect our children. I like what you said, that we oftentimes it's easy to focus on Milwaukee. I mean, what they're doing is horrific, especially because they're doing it in the name of equity, because they're championing Black and brown children. And in fact, what they're doing is actually hurting Black and brown children. And then they want to take away the only life raft that these families have, school choice. There are waiting lists. Parents are desperate to get their kids out of Milwaukee public schools and get them into charter schools, and get them into Lutheran schools, Catholic schools that participate in the choice program. It's the only chance their children are going to have for a better future. And Democrats, all they want to do is just pull the rug right out from under these families. And it's appalling that this is another subject that is never talked about by the mainstream media, that it is poor middle class families, families that come from, that are minority groups. They are the ones that they benefit from choice programs. And yet all you ever hear from the teachers unions and from Jill Underly, the current DPI head, and Tony Evers, the governor, and Democrats that are in the Assembly and Senate, is that the whole reason why education is failing is because of school choice. It's such a small amount of money. And the schools that accept choice, they are underfunded. They don't get the full amount. They only get 3/4 of the money. And yet they succeed. They have fewer resources. They don't have the fancy buildings, but they do have heart, and they're willing to do what it takes to educate kids, unlike public schools.
Yeah. And, Wisconsin used to, again, on this aspect specifically of educational choice, right, and empowering families instead of school systems, Wisconsin was a leader in this topic, really. It was at the forefront of it. And it used to be bipartisan, right? Democrat state legislators from Wisconsin were at the forefront of making that a reality in Milwaukee. And it's been quite successful. You're right. It's too small. It should be bigger in scale. But the reality is the people that are benefiting are really benefiting. And it used to be bipartisan in Wisconsin. Unfortunately, now the Democrats have gotten to be so radical that this is no longer an issue on which they can have any common sense or any compassion for these families or these kids. They just have to be lockstep. We are anti-private choices. We are anti-parents having choices, including privatized schools. Why? Because we are slaves effectively to the bosses of the teachers' unions, unfortunately. And so it's no longer a bipartisan issue. And every single Democrat of any prominence in Milwaukee, including David Crowley, in Wisconsin, including David Crowley, is against the school choice model, which is working. And the data show it's working. And this is interesting, too. I talked, Scarlett, to a couple of Hispanic, and you and I are both Latinos, and I spoke to a couple of Hispanic moms in Milwaukee. Unfortunately, they didn't want to go on camera, which I understand. Some folks just don't want to be out there politically. They see risk in that. But both of their children in Catholic schools, of course, the Hispanic community, very Catholic overall, both of them in Catholic schools via school choice programs in Milwaukee, and thriving, and in schools where they are loved, where they are safe, where they are doing well in educationally, where they're also, learning about their faith, which is very important to these mothers. And they're not wealthy people, but why shouldn't they have that same opportunity that wealthy people have all over America? And they love the school choice program in Milwaukee. So I sure hope that is another motivating reason to make sure that David Crowley cannot bring the failures of Milwaukee to the entire state of Wisconsin, and hopefully that Tom Tiffany gets the endorsement of the people of Wisconsin to say, you know what, the Democrats have really failed education in so many ways. They want to ruin one of the small examples of success in education, which is school choice. Let's give the Republicans a try on this. Let's give Tom Tiffany a try on this. And I think that's going to happen. But all of us need to work hard between now and November to make sure that these issues are exposed. And you're doing such a great job of that with the platform you have, which I know is really significant in that state. But we all have to continue to really work on this between now and November.
Yes, and if you're and I'm in the suburbs of Milwaukee. I live in an area where our school district used to be #1 in the state. I have seen the effects of what's happening. And like you said, and you talk about this a lot in your documentary, instead, the dropping scores, well, that's happening in the suburbs too. They're plummeting, math, science, reading. And instead of addressing why this is happening, they are instead changing. They're fudging the scores. That's why they met in the Dells, because so the parents in the suburbs didn't. I mean, they get very upset when it comes to education. I live here, and I'm telling you, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, if you identify as a Democratic Socialist or Republican. If you find out that your schools are failing your kids and your kids aren't going to get into the University of Madison, which is very hard to get into, and they take an ACT score and they get a 15, even though they're in honors classes with straight A's, I can't tell you how many parents are shocked when they get their kids' testing scores back and they're like, wait, my kid's in honors classes, they're getting straight A's, but according to this, they're getting a 15. I mean, that's when the light bulb goes off that there is some kind of disconnect. And what's happening is that rather than give staff members training, instruction, looking at the Mississippi model, think what can we do better? They sit these educators through nothing but DEI all day long. That's all they're all about. I sit through these training sessions. They never, ever do they talk about, hey, let's improve reading. Hey, let's talk about math. Let's talk about STEM. All they want to talk about is how much they hate America and that the declining test scores are because of whiteness. Right. And what a great way to keep your job and to pat yourself on the back and not take any accountability while children are essentially graduating from high school, reading at a 5th, 6th grade level. And that's why this is all so important. We have to hold these people accountable. And we have to, as parents, we have to be willing to look at our school district and say, you know what, we may love our teachers, but there is something rotten here. There is something going on at a higher level that is making it difficult for teachers to do their job. And we have a broken system.
Yeah. No, and that's such an important point too, that, by no means are we indicting teachers, many of whom are trying really hard to do their job as well as they can do. But they are unfortunately so hamstrung by terrible leadership above them. You're exactly right, at the administrator or even at the union level, for example. So, I am absolutely, I hope, exposing and in many ways really indicting the performance of people like Randy Weingarten, who's the head of the National Teachers Union, okay, who clearly does not have the best interest of children at her heart, just clearly does not love this country, does not want children to succeed, wants her power to be further amassed. So, I am willing to very publicly criticize people like her. And there's figures like her all over the country, including in Wisconsin. But most normal classroom teachers, most folks on the front lines trying to educate children care deeply about the children that they're entrusted with every day and want to do a better job. And we need to make sure that they are properly equipped and properly empowered to do that. So, I view this movement as a pro-child, pro-parent, pro-teacher movement. And again, as Tom Tiffany mentioned, that starts with making sure that those teachers feel safe in those areas where they're not safe. But also to your point about the schools that have better reputations and generally have better test scores, which most of the time means they have higher incomes, right? Oftentimes, Scarlett, the woke indoctrination nonsense is actually worse at those schools. It's worse at the, quote, more sophisticated schools than it is at the lower performing schools. And as an example of that, maybe the worst example in America, what I would give you is Loudoun County, Virginia. So some of the just most really horrific nonsense, regarding gender confusion and all of the woke ideology being thrust upon children. Probably the worst examples in America, at least that I know of, were happening in Loudoun County, which is suburban Washington, D.C. in Virginia. It's one of the most wealthy counties in America, places that generally had highly regarded public schools. So don't think that just because your school might have reasonably high test scores, at least compared to Milwaukee, or because you live in a wealthier area or an upper middle income area, that your children are immune from these abuses. In fact, as far as the cultural filth and the cultural pollution, they might be more vulnerable to it, actually, if you're in a higher income, or generally, considered to be more sort of sophisticated, successful educational area. So, I would encourage all parents to really pay attention. And that's true, obviously, outside of this election. I mean, just make sure you're watching over your children, make sure you're properly asking questions of the administrators and teachers at your school, and know what they are being taught, because it's super, super important. I think if you do that as parents and grandparents and just concerned citizens, I think you're also probably going to make election choices that are different than saying, you know what, we want another 16 years effectively of Democrat control over public education in Wisconsin.
Whether you're in Wisconsin or you're in another suburb area in a purple blue state across this country, a school that is considered a success, they have proficiency rates at 60%, 60%, 70%. That's really high performing, but 60%, that's an F. So if 60% of your students are reading at a grade proficient level, if 55% are performing math at grade level, that's considered exceeding expectations in Wisconsin. That's absolutely shocking. And I think most parents aren't aware of the fact that we've got a system under Tony Evers, a system, like you said, created by Democrats, run by Democrats, in which they are putting the thumb on the scale. And they're telling you, oh, we exceeded expectations. They give out awards for 60%. That is an F. And I've been saying this for 6 years, wake up and smell the Marxism here. They're so focused on all of the wrong things and not the right things. And again, I do not blame teachers. I have talked privately with so many teachers that when I have a conversation with them, sometimes they come up to me huffing and puffing like, oh, Scarlett. And by the time we're done, we agree on 95% of the things. And they're like, you're nothing like I thought. Then they start to reveal, yeah, you're right about this. You're right. We're not safe. I'm leaving after 16 years because I can't handle it anymore. I'm not supported. It's too rigid. They don't even allow creativity. They don't allow teachers to actually do their job in the best way possible. And there's something that you talk about before we end. I think it's really important to note that in your documentary, you mentioned that while there's declining enrollment, and this is true in Wisconsin and across the country, there is declining public school enrollment for many reasons. Parents are homeschooling, declining birth rates, lots of things. There is increasing hires in staff.
Yeah.
Those aren't teachers they're hiring.
Yeah.
Those are administrators. Many of them operate on the DEI level. So when we say that they are hiring more, they're not specialists in reading, they're not math specialists, they are not teachers. Teachers are not getting, they're not receiving inflationary raises, they're not supported, they don't get the tools that they need, and we're hiring less of them, and we're hiring more administrators.
Yeah. No, this is another one of these sort of X graphs, right, where two things are going in the wrong direction. So you've got fewer kids, right, fewer kids, but more staff. How does that make sense? Well, it obviously doesn't in the real world make any sense. Kind of like the other thing I was talking about, the other sort of X graph to go in the wrong way of property taxes soaring while test scores plummeting. So we want to reverse those X's, and would love to see more children, of course. Would love to see a higher birth rate. But regardless of whether or not that happens, the point is, with fewer and fewer students, and you're right, this is happening all over the country, you shouldn't be adding more and more staff, right?
Yep.
At the same time that you're getting worse and worse results from those fewer students. Okay, so that entire equation is off. Again, that wouldn't work for any business. It doesn't work in the real world. It certainly shouldn't work for our children. So yes, thank you for bringing that point up too, because it is a really important one. The bureaucracy has thrived while children have suffered,
Yes.
while parents have seen worse and worse options for them, while taxpayers have spent more and more for declining educational outcomes from our communities. All of that has to stop. That's got to reverse. We can't keep doing more of the same. When you look at the metrics, when you just look at the cold metrics and you say this isn't working, then you can't, I don't think, logically say, well, let's just keep doing the same thing. I mean, no, it's time to change, time for reform.
And in closing, you end your documentary talking to two moms. Can you talk a little bit more about that and why you wanted to end it talking to real life Wisconsin moms, one of them who is also a school board member?
Yeah. So listen, I thought that was really important. In my documentaries, generally, I don't only want to talk to the so-called experts, right? Because a lot of regular folks often have more expertise than the so-called experts. But also in this case, it's really important to talk to parents, right? About, hey, what have you seen with your children? And so we got one mom each, one who homeschools, which, because I think that's important. And of course, majorly growing trend all over the country, including in Wisconsin, for great reasons. Homeschoolers really need to be supported. But then also another one who children in public schools and serving on the school board, which I think is also really important. So really involved in the public school lane in a serious way, not just as a parent, but also as an elected official now. And then another one who has chosen to go the homeschool route. And even though they've chosen very different educational options, it's interesting, they agreed on so much, right? Particularly regarding the basics of phonics and things like that, and education, the importance of values. Look, all education has values too. We can't pretend it doesn't. So, I am most focused in this documentary on teaching the critical skills that people need to be successful in life, being proficient in math and reading. But all education, by necessity, just by definition, also involves the transmission of values. I mean, the question is, what values are going to be transmitted? And for a very long time in American history, it was largely the civic values, right, of love of country, patriotism, pride in this nation, recognizing that, yes, of course, like any human institution, we have lots of flaws and we've had lots of blemishes, during our history. But on the whole, it's been a magnificent journey to be an American over the decades and centuries, and it's an incredible gift today. We want those values to also be passed on, certainly in the homes, but also in schools. So not enough of that happening, not enough success in terms of the actual sort of hard educational skills that children need, but also too much woke cultural indoctrination garbage. And those moms, thankfully, are doing everything they can, both as mothers, as parents, but then also in their communities to make sure that things get better in Wisconsin. So people like that too, though, they need to be empowered from above. Yeah. They need to be empowered from Madison, unfortunately. And that's what we're also working on changing.
Well, where can people find, now we aired this before this interview, but where can people find this and let us know how they can learn more about your work?
Yeah, please go to CortesInvestigates.com, Cortes with an S at the end, CortesInvestigates.com. It's all there, all the content. It is free. We don't try to monetize this. We just want as many people to see it as possible. So please watch it, share it. We try to keep our documentaries, relatively short, the 30-minute time frame. I think you'll learn a lot. I think you'll be angry, but then I also think you'll be inspired to take action. At least I sure hope you will be into November.
And you don't have to be from Wisconsin to learn something from it, because what's happening in Wisconsin, it's happening everywhere. Every time I get together with other Mama Bear activists, we kind of think like, do they have this same playbook and they just kind of email it to each other? What's happening here is happening everywhere. So you do not have to just be from Wisconsin to glean and learn from this. You're going to see what's happening in your area and your state reflected.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, again, one of the reasons I focus so much on Wisconsin, I pulled your state more than any other state. I've been there a lot. I'm coming back to do more documentaries before this election, is that I really believe as Wisconsin goes, the country will go. So, I mean, it is in many ways a microcosm of America. And so you're exactly right. This matters to everyone. And Scarlett, thank you for doing such important work on behalf of your children, your community, your state, this country. You're a really, really important voice out there. And I know your platform has only grown. And I think that's a great thing for you and for the country.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to Wisconsin and telling the truth, the good, bad, the ugly, and because we are an important state. And I do think that we're a bellwether. And so it's really important that Wisconsin, like we've got to wake up and do the right thing. Thank you so much, Steve. I look forward. Hope maybe I'll see you when you're here next week.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scarlett.
Bye. That was a great interview. Steve Cortes is amazing. I'm hoping that I can see him when he's in Wisconsin again next week. But time was going so fast, I forgot to mention this breaking story. So I'll talk about it now. So David Crowley, the Democrat who will be running against Tom Tiffany in the upcoming November gubernatorial election in Wisconsin, this was just revealed. He sponsored a bill to put tampons in men's and boys' bathrooms, including public schools in Wisconsin. He wanted to put tampons and pads, sanitary napkins in all public facilities, including public schools. And there was no caveat made that, of course, not boys' bathrooms. No, in order to be equitable, these tampons and pads needed to go in the boys' bathrooms. So this was a bill that didn't see the light of day because Republicans, that's why it was stopped. But if he were to be elected governor, if Democrats could get control of the Assembly, the Senate, guess what they're going to do? They're going to put tampons in your son's elementary and middle school and high school bathrooms. Yes, because men can menstruate. This is the insanity, okay? And I think people say, oh, why is this important? Because if there's a candidate that can't stand up for biological reality, a candidate who doesn't have the gumption, the courage to say, no, we should not put tampons in a third grade boy's bathroom, then why would you vote for that person? How can you trust them? It's a bellwether issue. It's a bellwether topic. If they think men menstruate, if they think men can get pregnant, if they would want to change the Wisconsin statutes to remove the word mother and replace it with inseminated person, then you can't trust them on anything. Their brain is fried. They do what they're told. Because I can guarantee you, Dirk McGurk sure doesn't think that there should be tampons in a boys' bathroom. David Crowley doesn't actually believe this stuff, but he's going to do it. He's going to do everything that Francesca Hong was going to do. He's just going to be a lot more sleuth about it and quiet about it. And he doesn't actually believe it. Now, she was a true believer, but he's going to do what he's told, what the donors tell him, what the bosses tell him. I think he's an empty suit that's going to do what is told. And that's not who I want running the state, because then who is actually running our state? That's a big question that I've been asking for the last 8 years. Who's in charge? And because I certainly don't think it's Tony Evers, who can't even throw a football and, is napping most of the day. So who's in charge? And I think it's problematic. I mean, I won't even go into the whole election, because that was just, no one's going to talk about it, because, that Milwaukee did it again. Someone that had dropped out of the race was polling in the single digits. Suddenly just, ooh, wow, it's a miracle. It's a miracle that the Democrats got their chosen candidate who had dropped out of the race, who just re-entered the race during the time of early voting, just somehow walked away with the nomination. But I digress. I think that everything that we talked about is so important, because it's not talked about. When I was running for school board, it's an issue that we tried desperately. We didn't have a lot of funding, but we were not just running on COVID and masks and COVID policy that isolated children, that didn't make any sense, quarantine periods that were outrageous, forcing kids to do the dumbest things, wear masks while they were playing basketball, wearing masks around their chin, all of the silly, stupid, bureaucratic rules created by Dr. Fauci, who now with the Fauci diaries, it's revealed was just a complete narcissistic, jerk who didn't know what he was talking about. So it wasn't just about that. That was the start. But suddenly, once we started doing open records requests and once we started to pay attention and we were following DPI and we were asking questions of our school board, we realized that, hey, every year, the Wisconsin DPI moves the goalpost. The requirements to exceed expectations, they change every year. 5 points, 6 points. That threshold keeps the standard, it just keeps getting lowered and lowered. And it's lowered so that suburban schools can exceed expectations, despite the fact that the suburban school children are testing worse every year. Now, COVID, we saw, I can pull that up again. We saw that huge cliff nationwide. We saw it like, boom, look at that. And now you see a little tiny bit of recovery. So, but this decline wasn't all COVID. There's a lot of reasons for it, but COVID just accelerated this decline. And we're really struggling in reading and math to get back even at the levels we were in 2015. And those weren't anything to throw a parade about. Those levels in 2015 were still below average in the world. These weren't great. It's not like in 2015 we were celebrating how wonderful education was. I was moving my kids from public school to private school before this because of what I was seeing. But I had all my kids in public school, and I slowly started to move them out, the younger ones, into a private school because when I had them tested, they were 2 grades behind the local private school. And I was shocked. I was shocked to learn that there was so much they weren't. And because we had moved to the area that I live specifically because of the school system, because it was rated number 1. Everyone said, oh, this is the best school system. We thought, oh, this is great. We have 5 children. It's hard to pay tuition for 5 kids. I traveled around. I'd homeschooled my kids. I'd put them in private school. We thought, it would be great if we lived in this area where we didn't have to do that anymore, where they had a great public school system. And turns out we had come in as the real decline had begun. And that like 2008, 2009, and that's when President Barack Obama is elected. And I think, and I'm not going to just say, no child left behind. And then we had Common Core under Obama. I mean, that facilitated a lot of decline. The woke education that I was completely unaware of at that time, that was affecting the way that our children were educated. This is all the Democrats for the most part. Now, there are Republicans that have gone along with it. There are fewer, and I don't want to make this a Republican-Democrat thing. It's just that the Democrats are so aligned with teachers' unions that is a marriage that dooms public education. Teachers unions and Democrats are one and the same. Teachers unions are just a funding mechanism for the Democratic Party, and they are the boots on the ground. So you cannot see a way for there to be real change because teachers unions and the Democratic Party are so intertwined. And this documentary mentions somebody, let's bring him up, Rahm Emanuel. He's the one that just recently sort of blew the lid on all of this when he said in an interview that Democrats lost the plot, that they got so intertwined with this sort of woke education nonsense and allowing boys and girls bathrooms and fighting like to the bitter end for boys to participate in female athletics and, you know, anti-ICE protests and BLM rallies in elementary schools. He's like, we lost the plot. And then the person interviewing him says, well, can't you do both? And Rahm Emanuel rightly says, no, we clearly can't. Look at these numbers. Look at these numbers. We can't do both. Look at these numbers. I'm going to pull them up again. This is a result of education policy that has been implemented by Democrats and teachers unions, and now Democratic Socialists of America. Like Corey DeAngelis says, they are diploma factories. They use our classrooms as indoctrination camps, and they're run by teachers unions. And the more and more that we can wake up teachers and say, like, you've got to understand that you too are a cog in this system. If you care about educating kids, if you care about the future of America, then you need to care about what's happening to education right now. And in Wisconsin, that's because of Democrats, Tony Evers, Democrats in the Assembly, Democrats in the Senate. There are, another thing that I wasn't able to discuss with Steve Cortes because of time limitations are the numerous amounts of bills that were introduced, that were passed in the Assembly, passed in the Senate. They went on Tony Evers' desk and they were vetoed. One after another. Bills that are good for education, bills that are good for students, bills that are good for parents, legislation that would start to model after the Mississippi Miracle. It's teachers unions cannot see any ideas that aren't born out of the gender studies program in Harvard. They can't see any of these succeed. Anything that involves private donations, private schools, religious organizations, just conservatives, even center-right think tanks, more libertarian think tanks, anything that isn't dyed-in-the-wool woke, waving a trans flag, any sort of solutions that aren't seeped in Marxism and gender ideology and critical race theory, they cannot get the light of day because all institutional power is held by radicals. And I don't think these radicals are very smart, but they do get paid a lot. And this is job security. So the more that we can just wake people up and say, look at your child's ACT score and stop being in denial that you live in a good school district. If you lived in a good school district that was doing their job, your child who's getting A's and is in honors classes, wouldn't be getting a 19 on their ACT. They'd be getting a 33 or 34, and they could attend the college of their dreams. Instead, you're paying a fortune to hire some counselor that's going to coach your kid to get into school you've never heard of, and then they can either go deep into debt, or you can write a big check, or you can take out a big loan because they can't even get into the state school that your tax dollars pay for, because it makes more sense for them to take out-of-state students who can pay more money. Again, it's a broken system. It's broken from preschool, where DPI has gender expansive resources for 3K, 4K. They're focused on equity, and then you go all the way up to higher education. It's a broken system. Well, here's what has stayed with me. Not the money, not the resort. It's that nobody in Madison thought any of this was strange. 88 people, 4 days, $250,000, and a piece of paper at the door saying you may not write down what happens in this room. That's what happened. That was the convention just last year, Wisconsin DPI, when they saw the latest scores, all of the decline. They didn't roll up their sleeves and think, how can we fix this? They instead threw a big party and said, how can we hide this? How can we hide this so that we don't have revolts in the suburbs? They think they already have Milwaukee down and controlled. And Milwaukee parents need to do more to fight the system. But they knew in the suburbs, they'd have some real trouble when the suburban moms and dads saw these scores and saw that we're not exceeding expectations, because that's what they expect. So they hit it. They moved the goalpost, they fudged the numbers. So to the people running our schools, the administrators, that was just another day that ends in Y. A normal way to decide what your child is required to know. Understand what that tells you. They aren't hiding because they're afraid of getting caught. They think they own the media, and I guess they do, the mainstream media. They're hiding because they never have to explain themselves. They're hiding because they can, and no one will expose them. But we have Steve Cortes exposing them, Moms for Liberty, I'm trying to expose them. We have Brittany Kinzer. We've got Tom Tiffany. We've got a lot of people in the Assembly and State Senate that have been trying to expose this for years. It's not enough. We need more. To the parents who feel like they've come to this fight late, you didn't. You're here now, and that's all that matters. The number, because the people that they are protecting, it's never your child, it's themselves. The nation's report card isn't really measuring your child and what they know. It's measuring them. It's measuring how well they are teaching your child. So don't take this personal. Don't look at the scores and think, my child's. Point the finger at the people that are teaching your child and demand accountability for your child. They moved the line so their grade would go up, not your child's. They didn't do what it would take to get your child where they need to be. They just obfuscated so you wouldn't know. So when a 4th grader can't get through a chapter book, when an 11th grader is reading at a 5th grade level, they aren't held accountable. They didn't lower the standard for our kids, they lowered it for themselves. And we get to pay the bill. That's insult to injury. Here's where we have hope. Mississippi was dead last in the country, and they turned things around. Legislation has been passed and signed that would teach our kids phonics. It's just that the Democrats, the progressives, they are fighting every step of the way, fighting in court, fighting at the local level, fighting at the state level. Why? Ask yourselves this, why are they fighting a proven method that works? Phonetic teaching. Why? Because it's not approved by teachers' unions? It doesn't make sense. It's not common sense. Since 2009, the same man has been running education, and that's Tony Evers. Now, he's not on the ballot now. It's an open seat, but essentially he handpicked David Crowley. David Crowley is his guy. And David Crowley will be just as bad for education as Tony Evers, if not worse. And that's kind of hard to believe. Every single year, the gap between proficiency, that just keeps growing. They can fudge the numbers all they want, but fewer and fewer of our kids are reading and doing math at a grade proficient level. It's a good year when 60% of the kids can read at grade level. That's just a bang up year, and that's not acceptable. In MPS, you've got 2%, 3%, 4%. Schools, I'm not kidding you, schools where 0% proficiency exists, entire schools where 0% of the children in Milwaukee can read at grade level. This is the education of progressives. So here's your homework. Go to school board meetings, file records requests, pull up the nation's report card, go to the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty site. They have an apples to apples tag. Click on it, find your school district if you're in Wisconsin. If you're not in Wisconsin, actually find a Moms for Liberty chapter near you. I guarantee you there is an expert on what's happening in your state, in your area. So do that. Go to momsforliberty.org and find out what's happening. Pull up the nation's report card and look at your state's real number, your school district's real number. And then in November, if you have the opportunity to vote, do it, and vote for someone who hasn't spent the last decade or more telling you that everything is just fine, we just need more money, and oh, the Republicans. Oh, we need to be kind and belonging. Oh, equity would solve everything. It's not true. You can't get tired. They're counting on you to get tired. You have to stay in the fight. What is happening in education determines the future of this American project. We've celebrated 250 years this year. Let's celebrate 250 more years. To do that, we need to educate our children. We cannot allow public schools to be places where useful idiots are born, where they can just turn our kids into little Marxist foot soldiers. Education is the key for everyone, especially the children that are the most vulnerable. I know because I was one of those kids. I was one of those kids that were vulnerable. And my education was the key to not just surviving, but thriving and creating a wonderful life and having 5 children that are all well educated and that are pursuing their dreams. That's the American dream. I want it for my kids. I want it for your kids. I want it for their kids. So let's go about saving this country by saving education. Thanks, everyone.
In Wisconsin, if you're looking around and wondering what the heck is happening in education, you are not alone. You don't have to be involved in politics to look at the NAEP scores and see that Wisconsin proficiency rates are cratering. They are bad. You know how Jill Underly, you know how she handles it? If you don't know who she is the state superintendent of public education in Wisconsin, who gave a speech saying that pronouns save lives. You know what I think saves lives and improves lives? Teaching kids to read. Yet in MPS schools, there are schools that have 0% proficiency. You heard me right, 0% of kids can read at grade level. These are kids that are the most vulnerable. They're in MPS in some of the lowest performing schools. I'm tired of being lectured to by people who call me an extremist just because I care about education and not indoctrination. And if you feel like me, you should come to the town hall on September 21st, where we are giving parents a voice. Look who is moderating, myself and Deskovich, the CEO of Moms for Liberty. She's coming here from Florida to check in on Wisconsin. We also have Tom Tiffany, who's running for governor. We have Barb Dietrich, we have Amanda Nidweski, Corey Brewer, and we have my great friend Ella Fry. She's amazing. She is Wisconsin's Riley Gaines, and she's going to be here in person with her mom, Heidi. We also have my very good friend Jolene. She is a chapter chair in St. Croix County, and we're going to talk about the New Richmond Miracle. Why is that important all over Wisconsin? Because it's an example of what happens when ordinary parents, some who have never been politically active, never really even attended a school board meeting, didn't even know who their school board members were. But when they realized that there was a policy that was putting boys in their daughters' bathrooms, they organized. Moms for Liberty helped them, but the students, they made all the difference. This is an example of how you can make change in your community. You don't have to just sit down, shut up, and take it. This is a free educational town hall, and we're going to talk about lots of issues. We're going to talk about parental rights. We're going to talk about the state of education in Wisconsin, but we're not going to do all the talking. You get a voice. You get to talk. There'll be an open mic. This isn't a place where you're going to get talked at. You're going to be part of the conversation. And with a really important election coming up in November, isn't it time that you were a part of the conversation? All viewpoints are welcome, but I particularly like those non-woke ones. Hey, you want to challenge our ideas? Come and do it. We're here. We can handle it. We stand by what we believe in. They call us extremists. We're not. We're just regular moms and dads who are trying to save our country and save our state. I really hope to see you there. I think you'll learn a lot. And if you're just interested and want to come check us out, do it. It's free. Go to momsforliberty.org/townhall and learn more. If you watch this documentary and you want to do something and you want to be part of the change in Wisconsin, this is your opportunity. September 21st. And guess what? Vicki McKenna is going to be there. Vicki McKenna, the fabulous conservative talk show host on WISN 1130 and iHeartRadio, she's going to be there. You need to be there too. Calling all joyful warriors. It's time to get your boots on the ground in Dallas, Texas. Yep, Moms for Liberty is going to Dallas, Texas, October 8th through the 11th for our 5th annual National Summit. 4 days of training, strategy, and talking with like-minded parents from every state in the country. You'll hear from national leaders. You're going to have an opportunity to sit in breakout sessions that are relevant for you. They're built for real-world organizing. You're going to learn tactics that are winning school boards and how to effectively change district policy. This isn't just a conference where you sit and listen and clap politely. This is one where you are actively engaged. You're going to leave with a whole bunch of new friends and a plan for your community. If you're feeling like, I don't know if I can keep doing this, this is a place for you to be re-energized, recharged, and ready to face another year of fighting woke crazy people. Come on, join us in Dallas, Texas, October 8th through the 11th. You can register at momsforliberty.org. Hope to see you there. The man who wants to be governor of Wisconsin put his name on a bill that would stock tampons and sanitary napkins in boys' bathrooms. That's no exaggeration, that's a fact. He was going to put tampons and pads in boys' bathrooms in public schools. That's K through 12 schools, boys' bathrooms. It looks like Tampon Tim has a friend, Tampon David. August 28th, 2019, Assembly Bill 381.
So free menstrual products were required in, and I'm quoting from the statute, public schools, charter schools, choice schools, and government buildings. Adults with law degrees and legislative aids actually read this before signing on. One of those adults was David Crowley. He didn't raise a hand and say, maybe we should make this sex-based, maybe we don't put tampons and pads in the boys' restrooms. Nope, he didn't say a word because equity. How hard would it be to put female? Not hard, unless you are a woke, committed, progressive who doesn't know what a woman is. So David Crowley wants to put tampons in third grade boys' bathrooms. Now everyone is going to make a joke about it, but here's what isn't funny. While David Crowley and his gang of woke crazy people were thinking up really ridiculous ideas like putting tampons in boys' bathrooms, fewer than 1 in 3 Wisconsin fourth graders learned to read at a grade proficient level. In Wisconsin, we have the widest racial achievement gap in the country. Not top 5, we're number 1. We're number 1 in our inability to teach kids to read. Maybe they should have had a committee on teaching kids to read instead of one on woke gender identity politics. The bill died because sane people in the Wisconsin State Legislature refused to let it see the light of day. These are the same people that woke progressives are trying to tell you are extreme. Yeah, they're extreme, but putting tampons in a boy's bathroom, that's normal, right? Said no one ever. I'm not an extremist because I know what a woman is. It's not extreme to say that men don't menstruate. And it's ridiculous to think that putting tampons and pads in boys' bathrooms in K-12 schools is a good idea.
Wireless companies say that they stand for something. What exactly do they stand for, and why won't they say it out loud? Let me tell you what Patriot Mobile stands for. They stand for the lives of the unborn. They stand for the Second Amendment and the right to protect yourself and your family. They stand for our veterans and first responders who sacrifice so much for our freedom. Make the switch to Patriot Mobile today and support a company that doesn't just say they stand for something, but one that stands for the things that matter the most.
Moms for Liberty is an organization created to advocate for those who do not have a large and well-funded union to defend them, students and parents. And right now, I think Moms for Liberty is the undisputed face of the parental rights movement, which is a really important movement happening in this country right now. It is galvanizing parents and grandparents and community members to fight basically for the survival of our republic. We have over 130,000 members and 300 chapters in 45 states. And right now we're trying to capture seats on school boards across the country and galvanize parents to oppose critical race theory, gender theory, and all the other Marxist critical theories that seem to keep consuming the time of public education and even private education. This overt political indoctrination in schools is wrong. Kids can't fight what's happening to them in classrooms. They don't have the capacity. We have to stand in the gap for them. They are a captive audience to very radical activists with a very radical agenda. And we as the parents and grandparents have to be their voice. And I like to say, I am not inclusive. I don't want to include crazy people in my children's life. I don't care if they don't like me. I don't like them. So we're even. This is the most, I want to protect children from being sexually abused, politically indoctrinated, and groomed for something that is extremely nefarious. This is the most important thing going on in the country right now. I know there are a lot of things going on, but this gets to the root of so many problems when you don't understand why are young people voting the way they are, when you don't understand what's happening in college campuses, when you don't understand why there's a generation that just blindly obeys and doesn't understand rule of law. That is not an accident, it is intentional. And for too many years, we have turned a blind eye to public education, and we have got to focus on it because it is a critical institution that the woke radicals have completely captured on every level, from preschools to colleges, universities. It's just, these are captured institutions now. This isn't a conspiracy theory. I'm going to show you that in this presentation. And that's why I like to have this, because it's really important that you see this here. Yeah. So I have about 300 slides right now. I narrowed it down to what has been happening in Wisconsin over the last 2 weeks. This is the paper form. This is just 2 weeks. And that's not even everything. So, this is a book in my daddy's belly. The True Life Inspired Children's book follows the excitement and joy that two dads have for the anticipated arrival of their new baby. Me and My Gender Dysphoria Monster. A book created for 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds about a young boy transitioning to a girl and about ready to start taking puberty blockers. This is a recommended reading from Wisconsin DPI from the various resources. This is a newer book, and I have it at the table. Emily Drabinski, she is the president of the American Library Association, and she was at the Socialism 2023 conference in Chicago, Illinois. And she said, and this was recorded, but I think your point that public education needs to be a site of socialist organizing. She congratulated everybody there on all of their work to bring activism, radicalism, and socialism into libraries and into schools. And she said it was their job to train the next generation. And how do you think she's going to train them? This is my friend. She is now 22 years old, but when she was 16 years old and struggling, Luca had a double mastectomy. At the age of 16, it was her first medical intervention. Puberty blockers, hormones. Her parents finally said no when they were about to remove her uterus when she was 18 years old. She was scheduled to have her uterus removed. She thought that might finally make me happy. She had several comorbidities since she was 12 years old: cutting, bulimia, anorexia, depression, anxiety. And she went online and she was told this would make her happy. She's really a boy. Now, she is suing. She is now the 5th girl to sue large hospitals, large institutions, the doctors that did this to her. And I'm very proud of her for what she's doing, because it's going to be through these massive lawsuits that we finally end a lot of this. They're going to have to pay a price, a huge financial price. Green Bay, Wisconsin, this was breaking today. I was working with Libs of TikTok. Green Bay high school teacher, drag queen, bears all. I had to cover up the pictures. This is a teacher in Green Bay that's a drag queen that had an Instagram account, a TikTok account, OnlyFans, and he told his students to follow him. Among the images that students saw was nearly nude photos of their teacher, and at anything but clothes party, he posed with his back to the camera wearing what seemed to be a duct tape thong. He made his account private when parents started to complain, but what is the district doing? Nothing. He is still employed. They allegedly did nothing and claimed that this was not a part of his professional role. The Pulaski High School administration, when they tried to, that's what they said when they were confronted by the parents. Another in Green Bay, this happened at the end of August. A trans-identifying biological male was allowed to try out for the Southwest High School volleyball team. He made the team. Biological girls received injuries, bruises, welts during practice. When they wanted to shower, they had to find other accommodations, or they had to shower in front of this biological boy with fully intact genitalia. When the parents complained, they were told, if you're uncomfortable, find another place. The girls' comfort didn't matter. All that mattered was the biological boy's comfort.
Find another place?
Find another place, yes. They would have to find another place to change, another place to shower, and that's the district policy throughout the entire high school. If a biological boy identifies as trans, he can use whatever restroom or facility he wants. By identifying as trans, that doesn't mean medicalization, it just means simply saying, hey, I feel like a woman today. That's all you have to do. No one will confront them because the teachers a lot of teachers are unhappy with this, but they are afraid to confront and then lose their jobs. But frankly, if enough stood together and confronted this, I think it would end, and it would definitely be something I'd be willing to lose my job over. This just happened I'm not Osceola. I always a teacher's aide was charged with sexual assault of a 9-year-old. The teacher's aide had been charged with repeated sexual assault, and finally they have been removed from the district. And this is just something this is what was told to parents. Be an ally, use your white cisgender privilege to get men and boys into women and girls' bathrooms, shower rooms, and on their sports team. Also in Osceola, this is a teacher, recently hired, high school AP Lit teacher. She herself sent around her dissertation to all the school staff. Her dissertation, Sexual Warfare. And it is the clinch covers, step backs, and historical romance novels in the wake of the golden age of pornography. I can't post, she had images of Penthouse, Hustler, some of these things in her dissertation. Sexually degraded language by sticking food into various areas. I could not post on social media what was in her dissertation that she shared and happily promoted. I have a feeling that parents might want to keep an eye on this teacher and be careful what she's teaching kids. I have the entire dissertation. I started reading through it. I was appalled and shocked. First of all, the grammar was horrendous. Second of all, it was a really I couldn't believe that this is how she's going to get her PhD, and I can't believe that she passed this around, and still the district thought, this is a good idea to hire her. This is River Falls, Wisconsin. Rainbow Library, Glenson. These are the flags hanging up all over the classroom, elementary school classrooms. Things to know, LGBTQ+, what that means, gender, pronouns, transgender. In the elementary school and middle schools, a Gender and Sexuality Alliance Club. Safe Zone. These posters are hung up all throughout River Falls and in districts all over the state. Whenever you see this, you know that it says this is a place where people of all sexual orientations and gender identities are welcomed and affirmed. Real quick, I want to point out that the group, Safe Zone Project, also had this on their website. I found this week, 30 plus examples of Christian privileges. If you're a Christian in the United States, these are you have a bunch of unearned benefits you get that members of other faiths or non-religious people do not. It is not about shame, it's about understanding. Know your privilege as a Christian. And you should submit your privilege to others. Basically, you're privileged to be a Christian. That's a privilege you didn't earn, and you should give it up for other people. If they have values that don't align with yours, set your values aside for theirs. So Max Eden just posted this, and your kids can identify as a rock. Their personal pronoun, rock, self. Moon, your pronoun, moon, self. How you would use that in a sentence? Rock just went, referring to myself. If I said I just went to the store and bought myself a Coke, or Rock just went to the store and bought Rock self a Coke for Rock. If left unchecked, gender ideology has zero limiting principles and it descends into madness, absolute madness. All of this, they're called neo-genders. There are literally hundreds of them. And all of this, everything that I'm showing you can be linked back to Wisconsin DPI and their partnerships with Glenson, the Safe Zone Project, Gender Spectrum, the Trevor Project, Advocates for Youth, and many activist organizations that schools use as recruitment centers. Go a little faster. This right here, this is all linked on Wisconsin DPI, Gender Development Facts, what do young children know about their gender, children, parents and gender, gender affirmation. These are all tools to be used by parents and by teachers. Are you transgender? Elkhorn. This is a survey that was given out to students, middle school and high school, asking them very, very personal questions. They asked them, are you 10 years of age, 11, 12, 13, 14, and on? And what gender do you identify as? What are your pronouns? Are you transgender? This is in Wisconsin. Let me see, this is the Monroe Grove School District in Dane County. So this is what are your words? And so 6-year-olds, without parental knowledge or consent, as part of an equity initiative, read this book, What Are Your Words? And it was a gender journey on pronoun use. Again, parents weren't contacted, they didn't know. And when they contacted the school after finding out what happened, they were told by the principal, next year we'll foreshadow for you, but we won't give you the materials. And we won't tell you when we're doing these equity initiatives. Just know that they are part of our DEI, and that's all we're going to tell you. And go a little bit faster, but I think you might all know about this. If your parents aren't accepting of your identity, I'm your mom now. That was from Eau Claire. In that presentation, which is professional development, this is very important. Teachers are given professional development as part of their licensure. The teachers were told parents are not entitled to know their kids' identities, that knowledge must be earned. Teachers are often straddling this complex situation. And in the Eau Claire Area School District, our priority is supporting this student. These are just some of the school districts that have the same transgender, gender non-conforming policies. These policies openly state that school district personnel can and should keep a student's transgender status concealed from parents, keep secrets from parents. In this country, and this isn't all of them, there are 1,044 districts, 18,331 schools, and over 10 million kids that will operate under this umbrella, where they will keep secrets from parents. This was a professional development. Milwaukee Public Schools, one of the psychologists was giving this, but it was professional development, which means school counselors from across the states were in the attendance, hundreds of them. In this, they were told about furries, a furry identity. That kids can identify as animals. They can identify as rocks, unicorns. You affirm it. The kids are in charge. Whatever they say goes. And if the parents don't like it, well, don't tell them. And if you live in California, they'll just take your kid away. They just passed that legislation. My advice, never let your kids see a school psychologist unless you are physically present, and put that in writing. And there's a lot more. This is with the school psychologist, just more of what was given in their presentation. This is the DPI Educational Equity Project, and this year they're bringing in Ibram X. Kendi with your tax dollars. Bettina Love and Robin DeAngelo. Bettina Love claims that all school choice initiatives are a product of white rage and whiteness and white supremacy, and they should all go. Ibram X. Kendi said the only way to be an anti-racist is to be racist. So discrimination against white people is the only way to make up for past discrimination. And Robin DeAngelo said that white babies are racist in the womb. They're born racist. They can't escape it. Your money is bringing these people in the 2023-2024 school year. And yeah, with town, there's a lot. The good news is that Moms for Liberty is working with a lot of local groups. We're trying to develop databases to find questionable books. We are trying to uncover professional development. We're trying to find out what the curriculum is in classrooms, and we're trying to elect new school board members. And when you have control of the school board, if there is a majority of sane people in charge, all of these policies can be revoked. There's a lot of power and influence in these local positions. Local elections matter. They're bigger than you think. Everything that I just showed you, a good school board can start to reverse all of this. And lawsuits, Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. And if they're already doing this in California. So if California can do this, we certainly can. California there's been several landmark cases, and there's school districts in California that are winning school board elections and turning things around, and that's why Gavin Newsom and the Democrats are working so hard. They just passed legislation basically saying that if you don't affirm your child's gender identity, then you will lose custody of your children. And when that child gets the gender-affirming surgeries and drugs, they'll send you the bill. This is in Wisconsin. There's a transgender parent and non-binary advocacy caucus, and they're working against the good common sense legislation that was trying to be passed by Barb Dietrich and many of the Wisconsin Republicans that would save girls' sports, that would stop gender mutilation, that would stop these surgeries, that would ban them for minors, and that would affirm parental rights. These are all part of our Wisconsin legislative priorities. And if you can come to the table in the back and learn more, but this was a recent article, we are growing, and they call us extremists. I call us sane. And that's what we're doing.
Early phase of my transition, I giggle a bit at how it felt to try out new names. I had the luxury of being able to order my coffee with a bunch of different names to try on for size.
These anti-trans bills are part of an organized nationwide hate movement designed to keep me and my people in the closet and increase our suicide rates.
Interfere and attempt to dictate what children can call themselves and which sports teams they can play on.
Still, I use they, them pronouns.
Is there an age like that where it would be inappropriate to let the child change their identity, their sex identity?
I don't think that there's an age. My strong belief is that all young people have a right to self-determination. We should trust them in what they believe is right for themselves.
People had talked today about trans people mutilating their bodies. I was cutting and burning myself long before I ever tried to transition. I do understand. I am a parent. My daughter is 9 years old. I don't need her to tell me as soon as something happens. That is not my job as a parent.
I am a non-binary person. I use they, them pronouns. You might consider me a successful trans adult. I am helping raise a trans child.
Creating humans in God's image, and there is no gender.
God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them.